Ottawa like 0 or +1. Northeastern Ontario, rain snow mix today. Southern Ontario, quite a bit of sunshine, fair weather. Again, watch the fog this morning around Ottawa and Montreal. Cool one in Ottawa and Montreal, only around 0-1 degrees. Quebec City as well. Now there's your rain and snow mix moving eastwards across northern Ontario, and through the afternoon to the evening as those temperatures drop, we'll see some of that rain mix over snow showers between Timmins and Sudbury. And then overnight tonight, fog, a lot of drizzle, maybe some light rain around the GTA, but that could be a bit of freezing rain north of Kingston towards Ottawa in the morning. And a bit of a rain.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio. Thanks so much for joining us. It is Thursday morning, and in Winnipeg today, we're going to clear. We're going to have a high of 4 degrees, and that's what it's looking like. In Brandon, some sunshine for you. Your high is going to be 5, and up in Thompson, cloudy, 60% chance of some light snow, and your temperature is going to fall, actually, to right around -8 this afternoon. Thanks for being here. The morning show's on until 8:37 a.m., and we have to introduce our new crew right after we say hello to Heather Wells for news headlines. Hi, Heather.
Hi there. Good morning. Well, some businesses hit by a string of arsons in Winnipeg are feeling a little more at ease today. After a 6-month investigation, police have arrested 35-year-old Jesse Wheatland on a total of 22 charges. Police say 11 properties were damaged, some multiple times. We're going to hear some reaction from some people who are relieved coming up in our next newscast. As well, today is Transgender Day of Awareness. The day marks the lives of trans and gender diverse people lost to violence and other harms. Several events will be held across Manitoba. Health Minister Uzoma Eseguera says the NDP government stands with the trans community. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather Wells.
Thank you.
So Heather's with us from our news department for the morning. Darren Marash is here directing the YouTube stream. Good morning, Darren. May McKillop is here directing the show. Hello, May. And also Joshua Tyfair is behind the controls. Good morning, Joshua. All right. So we talked about weather traffic. If you need us in traffic, 788-3093 is where you can give us a call. Today on the show, we have the mayor of the city of Winnipeg who's going to join us. Our monthly check-in with Mayor Scott Gillingham. Today, we're going to talk about the new encampment restrictions and rules. Remember, just this week, that new bylaw came into effect, and they have been moving people out of encampments. Where are they going? How is the wraparound support working? And is there still appetite at all or an openness to change the strategy here in the city of Winnipeg? A lot of other cities have taken a different tact, and they do have different zones set up where people can go for transition, but you're still camping if you're homeless. And so stay tuned. We'll talk to Mayor Scott Gillingham all about that. In addition, today on the show, a property developer, as you've been hearing in the news, who used to advise Peguis First Nation and its real estate trust, now has control of most of an old golf course the trust acquired 4 years ago. Bartley Kivas is going to walk us through that story. Stay tuned.
Today on Q.
SmackDown Women's Champion!
Natty Neidhart comes from a long line of wrestling legends. Bret Hart, Davey Boy Smith, Jim the Anvil Neidhart. But even with her family's success, Natty had to carve her own lane. She'll be here to talk about her new memoir, her family history, and the ups and downs of a life in the ring.
Q with Tom Power. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland. And on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. Lawyers representing veterans say an amendment in a new federal bill covers up a decades-long mistake. That mistake led to veterans overpaying for long-term care, and this amendment could help the government avoid responsibility. The CBC's Kate McKenna has this exclusive story.
It's about miscalculating long-term care contributions.
Lawyer Malcolm Ruby says the federal government is trying to dodge responsibility for an expensive mistake.
Instead of owning up to their error, they're trying to change the rules after the fact.
He is co-counsel in a proposed class action, alleging veterans overpaid for long-term care for decades. Veterans' long-term care is subsidized. The law says they're only expected to pay an amount equivalent to the cost of room and board in the least expensive province or territory. But Ruby says Ottawa made a mistake. The government excluded the territories which cost less.
That resulted in overcharges, and They were fairly significant overcharges for individual veterans.
A CBC News investigation first revealed this discrepancy. At the time, then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said the federal government was looking into it.
The Minister of Veterans Affairs has asked her officials to investigate this matter.
A year later, buried in a 600-page bill, the Carney government proposed an amendment to exclude territories from the calculation retroactively. Ruby says this could eliminate the federal obligation to reimburse veterans who overpaid.
Retroactively changing legislation is like a thermonuclear weapon that the government has in litigation that no other litigant has.
Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne dismissed a question on why the government is doing this, but says the budget includes additional money to help veterans. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
There are multiple reports the United States and Russia have quietly drawn up a plan for peace in Ukraine, but the EU's foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas says the deal is nowhere near done.
What we as Europeans have always supported is a long-lasting and just peace, and we welcome any efforts to achieve that. Of course, for any plan to work, it needs Ukrainians and Europeans on board.
The Financial Times and Reuters news agency have seen a draft plan. It would require Ukraine to surrender territory and cut the size of its military in half. In the past, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called those conditions non-starters. It is not yet clear if U.S. President Donald Trump backs this plan. Some of Israel's key allies are condemning the wave of settler violence in the occupied West Bank. U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee calls the most recent attacks terrorism. But as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urges security forces to crack down, many Palestinians say they're holding out little hope. Tom Perry has the story.
Mohammed Zabadi stands in front of a pair of delivery trucks burned and blackened down to their metal frames. The vehicles belong to a newly opened dairy where Zabadi works in Beit Lid in the occupied West Bank. Last week, the trucks were set alight by a mob of masked Israeli settlers. Zabadi says he heard noise and saw workers running. He immediately closed the doors and made sure everyone was inside. The dairy is back up and running, but Zabadi worries the attackers could return. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has condemned the recent spate of settler violence and urged authorities to pursue the perpetrators. But to many Palestinians in the West Bank, that's just talk. The town of Sinjar, north of Ramallah, sits behind a high barbed wire fence put in place, Israeli security forces say, to protect a nearby highway. People in the town say it's cut them off from their fields and hasn't protected them from harassment and attacks from nearby settlements. Sinjar's mayor, Motas Tafsha, doesn't put much stock in the Israeli prime minister's calls for a crackdown.
No, that's not true. Benjamin Netanyahu, with his team, they protect them.
Netanyahu's coalition government includes far-right parties that are staunch backers of the settler movement. And despite the prime minister's tough words, human rights groups and the United Nations say Israeli security forces have, until now, turned a blind eye to settler violence or actively supported it. Tom Perry, CBC News, Sinjar in the occupied West Bank.
The clock is now ticking down on the 30-day deadline for the U.S. Justice Department to release the Epstein files. U.S. President Donald Trump signed the order forcing their release last night. Willie Lowry is following the story from Washington. Willie, the bill was passed with overwhelming support for transparency, but some lawmakers and advocates are already pointing to a loophole. Tell us more about this escape clause that the DOJ could use to keep sensitive files secret.
So with President Donald Trump's signature, the 30-day countdown officially started, meaning in a month's time, the Justice Department will have to release the documents it possesses on Jeffrey Epstein. But the anticipated deluge of information may not be as robust as some had hoped. The bill allows for the Justice Department to withhold information that pertains to ongoing investigations. Also under the bill, the Trump administration is allowed to withhold information that could identify victims as well as images that involve child sexual abuse.
The timing here is critical. Trump has ordered an investigation into 3 prominent Democrats just as this bill was about to pass. How do critics connect the timing of those new investigations to the White House's ability to redact material?
So just a few days ago, Trump ordered Attorney General Pam Bondi to open investigations into several high-profile Democrats, including former President Bill Clinton and former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers. Trump also singled out billionaire donor Reid Hoffman. Now, these investigations could give the Justice Department cause for withholding some of the documents. Republican Representative Thomas Massey, who helped shepherd the bill through Congress, says he's not too concerned.
There is an exception for ongoing investigations, but you can't have 2 or 3 ongoing investigations and claim that you're not going to release any of the Epstein files.
Epstein's victims are also calling for a full release of the documents.
Thank you, Willie.
My pleasure.
Willie Lowry reporting from Washington. The Hudson's Bay Company may have shut its doors forever, but there are a lot of people who still want to own a piece of its history. Last night, HBC auctioned off some of its most valuable paintings, and the bidders collectively spent $5.9 million. The CBC's Michelle Song takes us through the highlights.
Selling now at Heffel's, the Churchill, $1.3 million, and congratulations to your bidder, Marie Helen.
The oil painting of the city of Marrakesh by Winston Churchill topped the bidding at an auction for some of the Hudson's Bay Company's most valuable artwork. All 27 paintings sold above their estimated prices. Robert Heffel is the vice president of the Heffel Auction House.
But that was pretty amazing. It was electric. It was definitely electric. Every piece did so extraordinarily well. A white glove sale is very rare in the auction world. White glove sale means everything sold.
The paintings are just a small fraction of the thousands of artifacts owned by the Hudson's Bay. The now dissolved company started selling these pieces to help pay off its nearly $1 billion debt. But one high-profile item is awaiting a court's decision on Friday. The Royal Charter is the document that founded the Hudson's Bay Company in 1670, allowing HBC the power to act as both a business and a colonial government. Cody Grote is a history professor at Western University.
So this one document, granted by the king at the time to a private corporation, essentially said Indigenous sovereignty or Indigenous rights to the land don't exist, and instead we're going to give them to a business.
2 Canadian billionaire families are proposing a joint bid of $18 million for the document, and they say they will donate it to multiple Canadian museums and put in place a national consultation process, including Indigenous communities. Michelle Song, CBC News, Toronto.
And later today in New York, a painting by the late Mexican artist Frida Kahlo could break auction records. The self-portrait El Sueño La Cama goes under the hammer at Sotheby's. Here is how Ana Destazzi, the head of Latin American art at the auction house, describes the work.
Here, death is no longer tragic. It's tender. Not an ending, but an enduring presence. Frida Kahlo redefines surrealism. In her hands, even death becomes part of living.
The 1940 painting features Kahlo sleeping in a bed with a skeleton reclining on a canopy above her. Sotheby's estimates it is worth as much as $60 million US. That is about 84 million Canadian. If this Kahlo goes for that much, it would make it the most expensive work by a female artist ever auctioned. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Thursday. Thanks for making us part of your morning on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and on YouTube. This hour, an award-winning Indigenous playwright, a community builder, someone we knew very well here at CBC, is being remembered.
He still had a lot to do. His work was not by any means done, which is the real tragedy of it all.
At the age of 57, news came yesterday that Ian Ross has died suddenly. From being the voice of CBC's Joe from Winnipeg to being a Manitoba theatre visionary, we will remember Ian Ross in our program today in a number of special ways, including later part of a haunting interview where he was reflecting on his own legacy in life. So stay tuned. That's all coming up on the program. In addition, this hour on the show, artificial intelligence, climate change, and the cost of living, all topics that are circulating around the water cooler these days. How does the next generation feel about that in the context of their future? We have that to start the show with some young Manitoba voices. Right now, though, let's go to Heather Welsh. She's in our news center with headlines.
Good morning. Well, a former golf course near Winnipeg, purchased in 2021 with money Peguis First Nation received as reparation for broken treaty promises, is now mostly in the hands of a property developer. That developer, Andrew Marquis, used to advise Peguis and its real estate trust. We'll hear more about what happened there. A First Nation-owned mining project is being touted as a game changer. Norway House Cree Nation purchased the former Minago nickel project last year. It has since been rebranded as a critical minerals project after the discovery of an abundance of platinum group metals. And one expert says this project may be more viable than Ontario's Ring of Fire. We'll hear why in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Let's get into the weather here. We're going to have a string, actually, where we stay above normal, and then next week it starts to dip. But today, a high of 4 degrees, clearing this morning. Tonight, clear still, low -8. Tomorrow, more sunshine, a high of 1 degree to round out the week. But look at Saturday with a high of 6 and Sunday showing off with a high of 5. That extends into Monday as well. So we're going to have some warmer than usual days here for the next few in Winnipeg. Currently in the city, it is 2 degrees. That is a warm spot in the province, and the sky is partly cloudy. Just because it's our first touch of the morning on the forecast, if you're waking up in Brandon, sunshine for you today, a high of 5 degrees. Currently in Brandon, it is clear and it's -4. And then if we look further north to Thompson, it's cloudy, 60% chance of light snow for you today. Winds will be northwest 20 to 40. Your temperature is actually going to fall to about -8 in Thompson. Right now, there's light snow falling in. It is -3. So warmer now and temperature falling later. If you do need us on the morning commute, whether you're walking, driving, biking, you can let us know on the commuter line what's happening on your way. Right now, everything looks good. So far, so good, so early, as I like to say, and 788-3093 is where you can reach CBC. Well, it's one thing to be of an older generation and be thinking about the future, but if you're someone who is young right now and looking ahead, what do you think of all of these quick moving, fast, drastic changes that are coming? All of these evolutions can be absolutely fantastic, but they can also be, in some ways, absolutely frightening. There's a lot of unknown out there. So we're starting the show this morning by asking teens about their thoughts on artificial intelligence, climate change, and the cost of living. What's it like for them growing up in a world with the threat of artificial intelligence, for one? And how are they feeling about climate change and what they're paying for the cost of living? Do they feel they'll own homes? CBC's Jim Agapito spoke to some students yesterday outside of a high school here in Winnipeg.
Austin Wang, and I'm 15.
Are you hopeful about your future when it comes to AI?
I'd say pretty hopeful because like when I grow up, I want to be like a vet, and AI, I don't really think can take over that because it's in the, medicine industry. So other things like computer science and all that stuff, definitely AI can take over it because it's with computers, right? So, and I don't think AI can take over the medicine industry, at least yet.
My name's Paige Rundle, and I'm 17. Not hopeful. Because AI has taken over a lot of stuff like jobs and schools, and sometimes you can't predict what AI has taken over. Like, for example, you don't know if AI is going to be replaced by teachers or AI is going to be replaced by basically everyday things. So I'm not really hopeful for a bit.
Maverick McGilvery, 16. Unsure because with all the stuff on the news lately, it's kind of been where AI's kind of getting to a point where it's going to take over the world almost. And that's kind of scaring me, but at the same time, it's also kind of just like, what can we do? It's just going to advance anyway.
My name is Lucas Deely. I am 16. Probably hopeful. Like, I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing as long as people, like, keep control of it. You know what I mean?
Brock Neufeld, age 16.
I'm hopeful. I think it's going to be very helpful in some endeavors, but in others it might not be the greatest, like especially for deep fake technology where people can pretend to be other people. It's probably not going to be good.
Are you hopeful about your future when it comes to climate change?
Climate change. I mean, not really hopeful because, every day we're pumping more fossil fuels into the atmosphere, and the climate change is getting worse, I guess, progressively. So may not be in my lifetime, but definitely will impact the world a lot in the future. Yeah.
I'm in the middle. It really depends on the government and what they do. But to be honest, the way it is, I'm not really hopeful for it. There's so much things going on. So, yeah.
What do you mean by things?
Like, there's so much unsolved problems. Like, there's some Antarctica problems, and there's like the oceans filled with garbage and stuff like that. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So.
Well, considering in climate change is making the Arctic melt and ocean rising, it's probably not going to go too well in the next 50 plus years unless we do something about it.
What do you think we should do about it?
Honestly, I think we should maybe start using more natural things, unlike, say, unnatural gases that we create ourselves.
No, I don't think climate change is a good thing. Like, even now you can see there's no snow on the ground. I don't think that that's good at all. Just because in the future, like, my kids won't be able to see cool animals like polar bears, stuff like that. And also, like, down south, it's going to get hotter and hotter and hotter, and you're not even going to be able to live there anymore at a certain point, even if that's not in my lifetime. But
I'm indifferent. I don't know a lot about the subject. It's probably going to be bad. Yeah.
Why do you say bad?
Well, if the whole planet's getting warmer, it's not good for it's just not good for anything.
Are you hopeful about your future when it comes to the cost of living?
Hopeful, because, it really depends on the job, right? Because, let's just say if you have like a pretty good job, cost of living is always going to go up, right, with inflation and stuff. So if you have a decent job, I don't think that'll be a problem. But definitely for like the lower class, that could be a problem. So.
No, I'm not, because an average house in Winnipeg for like maybe a 2 bedrooms, like $2,000. It used to be like $1,200 at least a month. But my best guess for everyone that's trying to have affordable limit is try to like put down the money for like a house. I think that's the possible best outcome you can do for right now. Rent is way too high.
Yeah, kind of, because it could get better in the near future if things keep getting better and better,
I'm unsure. Like, I feel like anything could go down at any point. Like, if we're talking about like houses and stuff like that specifically, like, I guess that could come crashing down at any time. But from the looks of it, that probably won't happen. But it's kind of scary thinking about like how expensive things could be just when I'm older. So yeah.
Again, indifferent. I'm not very knowledgeable on the subject, but it is expensive right now, especially in Canada. Yeah.
What are some of the things that you think are expensive?
Well, food and houses are expensive right now, especially if you want good quality. It's I hear houses are expensive. I'm not shopping, but yeah, it's more expensive than it ever has been, to my knowledge.
There's some well-spoken teenagers with lots of thoughts, right, on their futures in the face of all the different things developing here, starting with questions about AI. That was CBC's Jim Agapito. He was out talking to those young people outside a high school in Winnipeg yesterday. It's interesting hearing them talk about, I think one of the students there said, there's no snow on the ground, by the way, and that's not a good thing. We were recently up in Flin Flon, Manitoba, and you never know what we're going to get for weather. We were there for Communities in Focus, but everyone there was talking about how unusual it was. They were like, you're not actually getting the real north, they kept saying to us, because in this moment it should be snowy and much colder than it was, and we were out there just in sweatshirts and jeans. My next guest has some affection for Flin Flon. He's not here to talk about it, but I'm going to roll him in anyway. Moshe Landers, a professor in economics at Concordia University, is on the show frequently. Why do you have a love for Flin Flon?
It developed over years. I was in a book chapter where it was asking for some biographical details, and I even shared my love of Flin Flon and the birds up there. So Whenever I come on in Winnipeg, I'm always asking, like, what's the weather like in Flin Flon? What's going on up there? And it's just, I don't know, something in southwestern Ontario drew me to that part of the country. And, had a chance to visit just once, but just loved it. And it's always a little passion play for me when I come on.
You got to go back. When you drive in there, you're like, you just realize how much natural beauty and how unique it is when the rock walls start rising beside you on either side, which is a little bit Kenora-esque, speaking of Ontario. But yeah, it's just very cool. And then you've not really seen the clear, crisp blue of a Manitoba sky till you've been north. That's how I feel anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'll thank you. That was a great segue too. So I greatly appreciate it.
We're not talking about Flin Flon, though, with you. We're actually talking about the UAE because the Prime Minister Mark Carney is in the United Arab Emirates today. He's trying to drum up investment for the federal government's nation-building projects that he's been announcing. Now, this is the first visit by a Canadian Prime Minister to the wealthy Gulf nation since the 1980s, and it's part of his strategy to diversify trade away from the States. So remind us, about the UAE and how rich they are and what they can offer countries like Canada looking for investment.
So the UAE is the 12th richest economy in the world measured by GDP per person. The US is 10th, Canada is down in 27th. So we're talking about a very rich country. But beyond just the fact that it's a wealthy country, it has some of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world. It's number 2 on the list with about $2.5 trillion US under management. Canada's entire GDP for this year will be about $2.5 trillion Canadian. The only country that has a larger sovereign wealth fund is China, and right behind the UAE is Norway. We already do so much business with China. I don't know that that's an area that the Prime Minister wants to tap further. So next on the list then is UAE. And like you said, 40 years since anybody's been there from this country or from the political side. I think he's looking for some money to try and help fund the projects that he needs to catalyze this country.
And in terms of, what sectors he might be playing at and hoping to attract, what's your sense of that?
Well, we've already seen him come out with his big list of projects that he wants. I suspect that for people in the West, pipelines are next up in the next round of things that are coming. But, it's defense spending, it's port development. It's trying to build essentially a country that's more oriented east to west than north to south. And over the last 60 years, as we've grown closer and closer with the U.S. in terms of trade, a lot of that orientation has been north-south. But of course, with now hurt feelings, trade wars, tariffs, elbows up, that need to make sure that we're connected coast to coast is much more important. And the ability to get products out to market other than the U.S. means that you need to have that port access. So a lot of these large-scale projects outside of defense are going to be to try and make sure that we can move things east and west just as easily as north and south.
And of course, we continue to talk about Churchill from our Manitoba perspective on that front. But also the East-West power grid has been on the books here as a hope for many, many, many years. Although right now our premier seems to not be prioritizing that. He's looking at Churchill. He was here yesterday. What's the UAE going to want in exchange, Moshe?
Well, if they're going to invest money, then they're no different than any other investor. If they're going to lend money to Canada, then they want their money back with interest. If they're going to take ownership stakes in projects, then they're going to want profits or shares of the profits. And that would be perfectly legitimate. Beyond that, I think that there is a political play here where they're looking for respectability. I was raised with the idea that you are who your friends are. And if your friends are jerks, then you're a jerk. And if your friends are kind people, then you're a kind person. I think the same sort of logic applies here. The UAE has some big question marks hanging over it when it comes to human rights domestically and foreign. And some other issues that might make it a regime that you don't necessarily want to get into business with. But I think from their standpoint, if they can try and glom on to people who have good reputation like Canada does, then that might be able to raise their profile. They've done a very effective job in sport washing, associating their country with high-level soccer clubs in Europe. And I think that they can use their sovereign wealth fund to try and project that, hey, we'll help you with projects in exchange for us being able to say we're friends with Canada. That might go some way towards solving some of the issues that they have these days.
Let's talk about some of those issues, because I suspect since we started the interview, there's going to be some listeners that were sort of yelling at the radio, what about the human rights issues? One of them, when you're dealing with the UAE, relates to the war in Sudan.
Yeah, for anybody who's been following that story for probably 30 years now, at least, the Darfur region in the West has been undergoing a tremendous amount of ethnic cleansing, genocide. The atrocities had been perpetrated by a group called the Janjaweed that were active in that region for a long period of time. They've since been replaced by a group called the RSF. And it is thought that the RSF is being funded, supported, aided in whole or in part by the UAE. The president in the US has recently come out against them and saying that he's going to have to take a closer look at what's going on. The UN has raised some alarm bells, and human rights groups are saying that, yes, this looks like the work of the UAE that's behind it. The prime minister met with the president of the UAE in the middle of the night for us during the day over there. There was no press conference after their meeting. He didn't raise the issue allegedly during their meeting. And prior to the meeting, where there's usually that photo op where the press can gather around while they're sitting in chairs looking at each other and smiling, that event didn't take place either. So it seems to be very strictly controlled. And Canada diplomatically has not said anything about UAE involvement in Sudan, beyond the fact that that might be morally and ethically wrong if it is in fact true. It also puts us out of alignment again with the U.S. And this is maybe something from a political standpoint beyond just the moral and ethical bit. Do we really want to get on the wrong side of the U.S. again and everything that's entailed for what it's done to our economy over the last year?
All right, Moshe, always grateful to have your perspective. Thank you.
Anytime.
That is Moshe Lander, economics professor at Concordia. We're going to ease you into the news with a bit of music. This is Cinca and Silver Lines, a Canadian Peruvian musician from Montreal. Looks to her roots to create kind of a blend of electronic music that's progressive. Cinca and Silver Lines, artist out of Montreal. Well, still ahead, we're going to see if there's any silver linings in what we're going to hear in financial news this morning. Unlikely, Chrisley Ramlichan's on after the news talking about some growing concerns about a possible artificial intelligence bubble. That's right after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is 2 degrees. Grab those shades. You'll need them. The sky's going to clear this morning. The wind is going to pick up around noon, just a bit, west at 20. And similar to yesterday as far as temperature, a high today of 4. Some businesses hit by a string of arsons in Winnipeg are feeling a little more at ease today. After a 6-month investigation, police have arrested 35-year-old Jesse Wheatland on a total of 22 charges. Police say 11 properties were damaged, some multiple times. They include constituency offices of 2 NDP cabinet ministers, as well as several restaurants and bars. Jay Kilgore at the Manitoba Restaurant and Food Services Association is relieved.
I know how much work they put into this investigation, and I'm thankful that it's over now. And these, a lot of the fires that had been brought to our attention through the association, today's arrest checked off a lot of those boxes.
Police say the arrest is not connected to a recent string of extortion attempts and arsons at other businesses. A former golf course near Winnipeg, purchased with money Peguis First Nation received as reparation for broken treaty promises, is now mostly in the hands of a property developer. As CBC's Bartley Kivas reports, that developer used to advise Peguis and its real estate trust.
Peguis First Nations Real Estate Trust bought the former Meadows Golf Course in East St. Paul in 2021. The trust used $10 million in treaty land entitlement money and also took out a $5.5 million loan. According to a purchase and development agreement obtained by CBC News, the trust defaulted on that loan in November 2024. That deal shows most of the Meadows is now controlled by Andrew Marquis, a Winnipeg developer who used to advise both Peguis and its real estate trust. The loan the trust defaulted on was from a company controlled by Maureen Diamond, who's married to Marquis. Peguis lawyer John Galis is questioning the deal.
It doesn't appear to me to be a fair transaction.
Greg Stevenson, the former chair of the real estate trust, says it had no choice but to make this deal. Stevenson said no lender would take on the debt.
This was the only solution we could have had. Nobody would touch us.
According to the agreement, Marquis has up to 7 years to pay the trust $10 million. Marquis's lawyer Kevin Toyne said in a statement the deal is like any other commercial transaction. Toyne said Marquis has assumed all the debt and the development risk. Diamond declined to comment. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
It's believed a First Nation-owned mining project could turn Manitoba into a hub of clean magnesium. Norway House Cree Nation purchased the former Minago nickel project last year. They have since rebranded it as a critical minerals project after discovering an abundance of platinum group metals. Jim Rondo is Major Projects Director for Norway House.
We found out that we had a treasure chest of all sorts of critical minerals and very obscure minerals that really makes the project much more valuable and unbelievably more attractive to produce.
Rondo says Norway House needs help to get this project to production. They've asked the federal and provincial governments for $180 million total. Rondo says the project could make that amount every year by 2030. There are multiple reports the United States and Russia have quietly drawn up a plan for peace in Ukraine. But the EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, is making it clear this deal is nowhere near done.
What we as Europeans have always supported is a long-lasting and just peace, and we welcome any efforts to achieve that. Of course, for any plan to work, it needs Ukrainians and Europeans on board.
The Financial Times and Reuters news agency have seen a draft. It would require Ukraine to surrender territory and cut the size of its military in half. In the past, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called those conditions non-starters. It is not clear if the U.S. president backs this plan, but it does appear to be inspired by his administration's proposal for peace in Gaza. Meanwhile, U.S. President Trump has signed into law a bill to release the Jeffrey Epstein files. Those documents could shed new light into the late sex offender and the case that's attracted speculation and conspiracy theory. Mirinda Lacerda says she was 14 when she met Epstein and that he had sexually abused her. She hopes these documents allow her and other victims to heal.
Yes, it will help us. It will help us gain transparency and some sort of justice in our lives of what we did, because a lot of us, as traumatized we are, and the PTSD that we carry today is insane. And I don't think we'll ever recover from that with all the therapy.
The U.S. Justice Department now has 30 days to release those files. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. Manitoba's health minister says it's important to stand up for gender-diverse Manitobans this week. Trans Day of Remembrance today caps off Transgender Awareness Week. This week, Alberta's government tabled legislation to invoke the notwithstanding clause to force legislation that critics say violates the human rights of trans youth and adults. Manitoba's health minister, Uzoma Eseguera, says the NDP government stands with the trans community.
It's difficult to see trans youth and their families struggling under conditions that, you think we'd be well past by now. But this week in particular, it's so important for us as a province to celebrate the fact that we're led by a premier and we have a government that stands with trans communities.
Manitoba Premier Rob Canoe confirms the NDP will reintroduce legislation to deter the use of notwithstanding clause to target the rights of trans people and vulnerable groups. You can find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather, I know that later we might not have the time. We have a couple of items on the program about Ian Ross, but I just really feel like if we could just take a moment, you and I here for a minute to talk about him. He was just here in September talking about his playwright series. We're going to hear a bit about that this half hour, actually. Kelly Thornton's going to be remembering him. 57 years old, died suddenly yesterday. People may know on CBC, where he was here working with us for many years. He would offer his Joe from Winnipeg column, that character he created back in the day. Today would sound, Ian would say this, highly inappropriate in so many ways, but maybe not the way he'd do it. But when you listen back to his messages in Joe from Winnipeg, the writing, the laughter, the moments. But I just want to say about him, every time he was at CBC, I learned so much from him. And I remember when the Truth and Reconciliation, the survivors were talking at the Forks, and there were moments where he was in to do his column, and it was just sort of having moments with him in CBC, everything he would talk about back then about reconciliation meant, what community building meant, some of the hard truths that people were yet to speak. And Ian was speaking them all the way along to build community, also to build art, to mentor writers. He was always doing this, and he was just such a lovely, gentle person in person as well.
A beautiful human.
Yeah. So I don't know what you're reflecting on today. For me, that was it. Just thinking of him, his kindness and his, but also his grit, like under that, conviction.
And I wonder
humanity.
sometimes if he even realized just how much impact he had as a person. Megan Ketchison, we were talking in the newsroom just now about one of the Christmas events that CBC held. It was right when Joe from Winnipeg was just beginning on information radio, and he got on the stage and said, "Hello, I'm Joe from Winnipeg," and the whole room erupted. And he was even kind of startled, not anticipating that kind of a response, but he did have impact.
Yeah, and you could see him being startled because he was that person.
Humble.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
I just want to take a personal moment. Of course, we will be remembering him in a bigger community legacy kind of a way throughout the program. All right, it's time for the regional forecast now. It's 22 minutes to 7 o'clock, and I can tell you this. Partly cloudy in Winnipeg, 2 degrees, the high 4. It's going to clear today, as Heather said, get some shades. Clear tonight, a low -8, sunny tomorrow, high 1, and then we get into these 6 possibly for Saturday, and maybe even 5 for Sunday and Monday. Winnipeg right now, as I mentioned, 2 degrees on your Thursday morning. Brandon is clear. It's -4. For you, sunshine today as well. Your high is going to be 5. You're very similar to Winnipeg here. A low of -11 tonight, a little cooler than here. But tomorrow, sunshine, your high is 3. And then Saturday, your high is 7. And you get into some nice conditions. Finally, up in Thompson, light snow falling. It is -3 right now. And for you, Thompson, in your city, you're going to continue to get snow. A 60% chance of that continuing. Winds northwest, 20 to 40, and you'll get colder. Temperature will fall to 8. So that means it'll be white and fluffy and lovely and hopefully not too messy. Tonight, cloudy, more snow on the way, possibly 30% chance. Some freezing drizzle, so take it easy if you're driving anywhere tonight. Low -11. And in Thompson tomorrow, your high is going to be -6. You'll warm up over 0 on the weekend too, though. You're looking for a high of 2 degrees on Saturday if the forecast holds. The morning commute is going pretty good so far. If you do need to update us, 788-3093. Let's get a business news update with Crystalie Ramlakan. She's here via Zoom, as she always is on the program. Hi there, Crystalie.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So let's start with the markets. There's been some growing concern about a possible artificial intelligence bubble. What's the latest that you're seeing in terms of the impact?
Well, the world's most valuable public company, NVIDIA, just reported strong revenue and profits that actually exceeded Wall Street's expectations, which could prompt a sigh of relief now. So the record sales signal that the demand for AI chips remains strong, even though there are questions about whether the returns from the technology will keep up with the pace of infrastructure investments. So NVIDIA has become both the backbone and an emblem of the AI boom, with much of the industry's technology running on its chips. So for more on this, here's Carmi Levy, who is a tech analyst.
The AI market outperformed for much of the year, and I think investors were simply trying to take some profits, hedge their bets a little bit, and maybe catch their breath and ask, is this AI future really all it's cut out to be, or is it just a lot of hype? At least based on the numbers that we're seeing from NVIDIA now, there still is, a fiscal basis for all of the hype. In other words, this is good business, at least for now. If the bubble is going to burst, it isn't going to happen this quarter.
And Canadian company Brookfield Asset Management has launched a $100 billion AI program now in partnership with NVIDIA and Kuwait Investment Authority. And so with the surge in AI adoption, Brookfield says the fund will acquire up to $100 billion of AI infrastructure assets, including energy, land, and data centers.
Next on your business report this morning, Meta is set to remove some young people from its platform. Remind us the details of this.
Yes, so Australians younger than 16 years old will be removed from Facebook and Instagram next month as the country prepares to enforce laws banning some teens from social media. So Australia will force social media platforms to remove younger users or face hefty fines. And there are around 350,000 Instagram users between the ages of 13 and 15 in Australia, and around 150,000 Facebook accounts. Now, Meta says it shares the Australian government's goal of creating safe, age-appropriate online experiences, but it says cutting teens off from their friends and communities isn't the answer. So they're not totally on board with this. And of course, there is keen interest in whether the restrictions can actually work as regulators around the world wrestle with the dangers of social media. So New Zealand plans to introduce a similar bill, and the Dutch government has advised parents to forbid children under 15 from using social media apps like TikTok and Snapchat. But of course, some experts are concerned the law will just be symbolic because of, the difficulty of implementing and policing online age verification.
And before you go, Major League Baseball has announced some new media rights deals for next season for 2026.
Yes, that's right. So it has new agreements with NBC, Netflix, and ESPN, foreshadowing the possibility of a maybe even more significant TV deal to come in a few years in 2028. So this new deal stems from ESPN's decision to opt out of its Sunday Night Baseball package earlier this year. So ESPN has a new deal after acquiring the rights to MLB.TV and a midweek game package. NBC Sports will take over the Sunday night games, and Netflix will be the new home for the next 3 home run derbies. So the MLB commissioner says the new agreements provide the league with the opportunity to expand its reach to fans. And I'm sure there are new fans after, that crazy World Series, especially
Jays
Canadian fans. Yeah. And like I was saying, the new deals foreshadow MLB's quest to raise TV revenue at the end of the 2028 season, when it's going to get these rights back, plus existing broadcast rights from both Fox and Warner Brothers Discovery.
All right, Crystal Lee, thank you for today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
With our business news live via Zoom, that's Crystal Lee Ramlakan. Well, Well, as we've been alluding to, folks in Winnipeg's theatre community and many across Manitoba are mourning today the loss of Governor General award-winning Indigenous playwright Ian Ross. He died suddenly yesterday. You may remember him for his radio career. We were talking about his character, Joe from Winnipeg, that recurred here on our show, Information Radio, all throughout the 90s and into the 2000s. He also created Pimuteowin Creators Circle. That's a program at Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre. It supports the development of Manitoba-based Indigenous storytellers. And boy, now it's certainly looking like a huge part of his legacy. Kelly Thornton is the center's artistic director. She spoke about Ian Ross with Up to Speed host Faith Fundal.
What's that like, Kelly, hearing Ian's voice as Joe from Winnipeg?
It's it brought a huge smile to my face. He always had something funny to say. The Pimuteowin Creators Circle is a circle of laughter. He really does lead through storytelling and through humor, and he's got a wicked sense of humor, and he's going to be really deeply missed by all of us.
He is quite the storyteller, isn't he? Because when you met him in 2019, was it obvious to you, as you became friends and collaborators, was it obvious to you about what he was drawing from to be able to tell these stories and tell them in such a impactful way that you don't forget?
Ian tells a story at any chance that he gets. So, if you know Ian, you're going to know that he tells long, winding stories that can last 25 minutes, and then you'll have the aha moment of his story. So that's not only as a playwright, obviously a celebrated playwright, but he teaches through storytelling. He leads through storytelling, and his idea to start Pimuteowin Creators Circle was really born out of conversations of, the need for more Indigenous stories to be told, and people, Indigenous people from this land telling these stories. So, and the whole idea that he had was that people that had never written a play before, but maybe artists in other art forms, come together in the Creators Circle to tell stories. And so people like Rosanna Deerchild with The Secret to Good Tea, and last year Dave McLeod with Elevate. And this year we have a new play from Pimuteowin with Rhonda Apatagans, In the Shadow Beyond the Pines.
Yeah, a big part of his work was trying to uplift the voices of young playwrights, in particular Indigenous playwrights as well. Well, what's your sense, or what did you get from him about why that work was so important, and why the Pimuteowin Creators Circle was so important, the space for him?
Ian has such a deep sense of generosity and love and hope. I feel like he leads by example through great love and hope. You feel it emanating from him.
Yeah, you can hear it in his voice.
Yeah. And that clip you played is very, it's political, and there's great social commentary in what he's saying. And yet he says it with a glint in his eye and great comedy in his writing. And I think, from our conversations around starting Pimuteowin, it was really about, elevating the voice and centering Indigenous voices on this land, and his medium is theater, and storytelling. I say, from time immemorial, this land has seen human activity, and with human activity comes story, and he's in a long, long line of storytellers, Indigenous storytellers, and so his impact will last for generations beyond this by giving the tools to other artists on how to write stories and share their worldview.
Kelly, there is always a public version of a storyteller or a performer. What would you say is the the real Ian Ross? How would you describe him to people?
I think Ian. I just think he's, he's wickedly smart. He's such a smart human. I was talking to Melissa Langdon, who assists Ian in running P. Mateoan and coordinating it. And Ian taught P. Mateoan on Monday night before his passing on Tuesday night. And she said it was a brilliant session. Like he challenged them, he gave them writing exercises, and said at the end of it, "Okay, everyone, well, it's time to get writing." And it's a great message to leave everybody with. I think Ian, he has a lot of hope and belief in a better future, and yet he's like deeply engaged and present in everything he does, whether he's working with community or whether he's working with artists. He has a belief in creating a better world and putting all of his energy and focus on that. And he's so incredibly present when you're with him. He's right there with you. So hopefully everybody that's grieving today can hold that presence of Ian for always and forever.
Kelly Thornton is the artistic director of Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre, remembering Ian Ross, who died suddenly yesterday. He was 57. People continue to write tributes all over social media this morning. You heard her and Faith reacting to a piece of Ian's work that they had listened to together. We're all going to listen to that together coming up after 8 o'clock here on the show as we continue to remember Ian Ross and his legacy here in Winnipeg, not just in the theatre community, but also toward reconciliation and just as a Manitoban. So stay tuned. That's still ahead on CBC. It's 8 minutes now to 7 a.m. on your Thursday morning. It's partly cloudy in Winnipeg. It's 2 degrees. And if you purchased bread from a major grocery store in the last 20 years, most of us have, you could be in for some cash, at least $50. It's part of the massive bread price fixing settlement that Loblaw and its parent company agreed to pay. It's pretty easy to apply, but the problem is there's millions of bots that are doing it and taking the cash. Francis Sims covers tech issues for us. Good morning.
Good morning.
So how often are these bots getting in the way of class action settlements like this?
It's like if you're camping in Manitoba in the summer, you walk outside the tent and the black flies or the mosquitoes descend upon you. That's how it feels with these class action lawsuits. As soon as a lawsuit pops up that you can file a claim for on the internet, these bots are all over it. There was a recent case with Juul, that was the e-cigarette vendor that was sued because of their marketing practices. They settled. 14 million people applied for the settlement claim, and over 10 million of them were fake, fraudulent. So it's hugely problematic. Within the first few weeks of the Loblaw's claim going up, there was, I think, between 1 and 2 million people that have applied, and they suspect that a number of those were fraudulent bots. We haven't heard the actual facts and figures, but in many cases, more than half of the claims that are submitted online for settlements are fake or fraudulent.
And why can't they be weeded out? Like, we're just not sophisticated enough, or just the speed at which these bots and the AI just comes at you and says, we're taking the money, that, by the time you figure out it's fake, you can't stop it?
Yeah, I think it's both of what you said. So a bot, simply put, is just a piece of software, usually very, very simple, that does something without human intervention. And so in this case, what they've done with lawsuits is they've tried to make them more accessible for the people that need the money. And so in this situation, like many others, they created a website. You go to that website, you fill in a form, and in this case, you don't need a serial number. I mean, there would be no serial number for bread. You don't need a receipt, because who has the receipt from bread they bought 10 years ago? And you don't need any ID. So if you're a bot, you can fake that information pretty quickly. And then in order to get your money, once you submit, it comes via an e-transfer. And if you want a check mailed to you, you actually have to take less of a settlement, I think $2 less. So it's actually easier to do the e-transfer. So if you're a bot, you can fake and bake it, right? You can just put any fake information in there. As long as the email address where the money is sent is yours, you're going to collect the money. So if you're a criminal, you go to bed, even if it's $5 per claim, you go to bed at night, and by the time you wake up in the morning, you're a rich person because the bot's done all the work for you.
It's also startling like how easy it is in a way that, we don't need receipts, whatever. Like if you never bought bread, you could probably be putting your information in and getting this. How is this getting in the way of people who legitimately are going to be, going for a class action lawsuit in this case or otherwise?
Yeah, so the law firms wanted to make it easier for the claimants to apply, right? That was good for them because they probably make more money, but good for us. And unfortunately, we found a major gap in the system, and it's causing three problems. One is its delays. There was a case in the U.S. for booster seats where about 700,000 booster seats were sold, and so the manufacturer thought, okay, that's how many people I'm going to have to pay out, but there was like 4 million claims. So the judge just stopped it, said, forget it, we're going to have to do it again. So that causes delays, less payouts, because in most cases, there's a ceiling. Like the company will pay up to a certain amount based on a certain expectation of the number of people that apply.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in the case of the Loblaws, you'd have to read the fine print. I think you get the $25, but you might get up to $50 depending on how many people applied. And if 90% are bots, and I'm not saying they are in this situation, you might get that 10 cents instead of the dollar that you're owed. So it means less money coming to the individuals that deserve it. And I think going forward, it's going to create more friction. Gone are the days where it's going to be easy to apply. You might have to talk to somebody on the phone. You might have to fill a piece of paper out. And if you have a busy life taking care of the kids, making supper, maybe it has to be worth, $100 before you'll go through the effort. And so you're losing out on the money that you deserve.
Until they can figure out how to stop this, which is a problem in itself that they haven't figured out, Francis. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Yeah, and one last fact, 51% of all activity on the internet now is bots. So it's not just fraud with lawsuits, it's everywhere. So it's a problem that we're just going to have to get used to, unfortunately.
That's sitting with me.
That's
a
another
big number.
conversation.
Yeah, that's another interview. Come back next week. All right, take care. Thank you.
Okay, bye. Thanks for having me.
50%. Francis Sims is Associate Dean of the Faculty of Applied Sciences and Technology at Humber Polytech, and with us, Polytechnic rather, and with us live today on CBC. It is 3 minutes to 7. Here's Heather Wells with our news headlines from Manitoba.
Good morning. Well, some businesses hit by a string of arsons in Winnipeg are feeling a little more at ease today. After a 6-month investigation, police have arrested a 35-year-old man on a total of 22 charges. Police say 11 properties were damaged, some multiple times. A First Nation-owned mining project is being touted as a game changer. Norway House Cree Nation bought the former Minago nickel project last year. It has since been rebranded as a critical minerals project after the discovery of an abundance of platinum group minerals. One expert says this project may be more viable than Ontario's Ring of Fire because of its existing infrastructure and shovel readiness. We'll hear all about it coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Let's have a look at the next hour of the show. With winter on the horizon, how is the city planning to tackle homelessness with these new encampment restrictions that just went into play a couple of days ago? Mayor Scott Gillingham will join us for our monthly interview, and we will talk about that and more. Also, in the next hour, a special task force spent a full year learning how the courts have failed sex assault survivors. Today, they have recommendations about how to change that. We will hear from the federal ombudsperson who released this new report. That's coming up live on Information Radio as well. And right after 7 o'clock, an ethics professor is going to weigh in who says that people get their sense of norms from colleagues, and it doesn't take much for, quote, a few bad apples to spoil the bunch. We're asking him how this applies to police organizations, of course, in the context of what has happened with Elston Bostock, Winnipeg police officer of 22 years who pleaded guilty to breach of trust, theft, and more. So stay tuned. That is all still ahead on Information Radio in the next hour of the show. Right now, partly cloudy and 2 in the city. Our high is 4, and we're going to have a clear sky. Call us if you have a problem on the morning commute at 788-3093, and that number works all across Winnipeg and all over Manitoba. So whether it's in your city or on the highways, let us know if there's a problem. 788-3093. World Report's coming up next. Stay with us.
Today on The Current.
Follow that dog.
I'm Rebecca Zandbergen. A lot of people love their pets, but some dogs really go that extra mile for their humans. The stories of Canadian dogs who have saved their owners' lives, often in unexpected ways, coming up on The Current.
The Current, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. There are multiple reports U.S. and Russian officials have drafted a proposed deal for peace in Ukraine, and it would require Kyiv to make some painful concessions. As Crystal Gomansing reports, European leaders are trying to determine if there is any validity to the reports.
For any plan to work, it needs Ukrainians and Europeans on board.
Kaja Kallas, the EU's foreign policy chief, says European leaders want to see an end to Russia's war in Ukraine, but it has to be a long-lasting and just peace.
We welcome any efforts to achieve that.
There has been no official confirmation from the U.S., Ukraine, or Russia that a new peace proposal has been drafted. There are media reports citing unnamed sources claiming the U.S. and Russia crafted a framework of a deal that, among other things, requires Ukraine to concede territory in the east and limit the size of its military.
This makes no sense. I put very little credibility into these reports.
William Taylor is a former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. He says the war can be ended if Europe hands over frozen Russian assets to Ukraine and the U.S. ramps up pressure through sanctions and support for long-range strikes deep inside Russia.
Those are, I think, very important to convince Putin he cannot win. He's going to have to stop the war.
European leaders meeting in Brussels will be discussing next steps to support Ukraine. Many, including the French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot, says peace cannot mean capitulation. We do not want Ukraine to surrender, he says. Crystal Gomansing, CBC News, London.
Officials in Gaza say at least 4 people are dead in Khan Yunis after a round of Israeli airstrikes this morning. Hamas and Israel both accuse each other of violating a near 6-week-old U.S. brokered ceasefire, and the violence has left some residents in despair. They say there's a ceasefire. Where is this ceasefire they're talking about, says this man. He is at a funeral for some of the 25 people killed in airstrikes on Gaza City yesterday. The rising number of dead has led Hamas to urge the United States and other mediators to immediately intervene. Prime Minister Mark Carney says Canada and the United Arab Emirates will begin free trade talks. He has also signed a financial investment pact with the Gulf state. But the Prime Minister's office will not confirm if Carney raised the violence in Sudan during his meeting with the UAE president. The CBC's Karina Roman reports.
The Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi is the largest mosque in the United Arab Emirates. It can hold up to 80,000 worshippers. Prime Minister Mark Carney got a tour from the Director General.
Yes, campus is very important to determine the direction of the prayer.
But earlier, behind closed doors, Carney met with the president of the UAE and signed a long-awaited financial investment pact. He also agreed to start free trade talks with the Gulf state, essentially declaring to one of the wealthiest countries in the world that Canada is open for business. Part of the Prime Minister's efforts to diversify trade partners and attract billions in foreign direct investment, particularly for the Carney government's list of major nation-building projects. But human rights groups worry the price to be paid is Canada's silence. The UAE faces allegations it's funding a paramilitary group committing atrocities in Sudan's civil war. Senior government officials say Carney raised a number of security issues in his meeting with the president, but would not confirm Sudan was one of them. Karina Roman, CBC News, Abu Dhabi.
A former mayor in the Philippines has been sentenced to life in prison for human trafficking. A Manila court found Alice Guo guilty of helping run an illegal gaming center in her small town. Hundreds of foreign workers were forced to scam victims. The center catered to clients in mainland China, where gambling is illegal. Guo and 7 others were also fined about $34,000 each. The 35-year-old who officials say is a Chinese national, denies her involvement. Philippine authorities say scam centers tied to Chinese groups have exploded across Southeast Asia, with tens of thousands of people rescued in recent raids. CBC News has learned Canada has formally issued bidding instructions to the two companies vying to build the Navy's new submarines. The document went to Germany's ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems and South Korea's Hanwha Ocean. But as Murray Brewster reports, there are fears this bidding process could become politicized.
I hope we've got that rigor and discipline. I'll believe it when I see it.
Former defense official Alan Williams is a worried man. He sees all of the political machinations around the F-35 fighter purchase, the demands for better economic benefits out of an already signed fighter contract. And he wonders, now that the bidding is underway on the submarine program, whether we'll be witnessing the same kind of brinkmanship. Williams says there needs to be a simple, clear message delivered to politicians.
Don't talk to any of these companies. Prime Minister, don't go meeting these companies. That will just muddy the playing field and potentially cost us risks legal down the road if people knew that you were intervening.
CBC News has confirmed that both Hanwha Ocean of South Korea and TKMS of Germany have received bid instructions. The submarine purchase, involving 12 boats, is potentially worth $24 billion. The instructions outline the federal government's expectations and how the decision will be weighted. The sustainment plan for the submarine fleet, meaning the potential Canadian maintenance work that follows the purchase of the boats, counts for 50% of the company's final score. That is significant. An official in the Defense Investment Agency, James Rourke, confirms the bidding instructions are out there. He wouldn't comment, however, on the specifics. Two independent sources tell CBC News the companies have until March next year to submit their formal bids. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
Fertility advocates say they are disappointed the Liberal budget did not include funding for in vitro fertilization. During the election campaign, Prime Minister Mark Carney's party pledged to provide up to $20,000 per cycle of IVF. But there is no mention of it in the budget. The Office of the Health Minister says the government knows treatment costs present a challenge for many Canadians. It says there will be more to say in due course. The Alberta government is moving ahead with a controversial new expansion of private health care. Premier Danielle Smith plans allow surgeons in the public system to create a parallel system of care. As Aaron Collins tells us, this move comes as Alberta's fiscal watchdog says an attempt to privatize medical testing labs was a costly failure.
We're calling it the dual practice surgery model.
Premier Danielle Smith announcing on social media that doctors in Alberta will soon be able to perform elective surgeries for a fee and still practice in the public system.
Those who are able and want to can pay for the entire cost of their surgery or have it paid through employer insurance plans.
A reaction to the move inside the legislature was swift.
Mr. Speaker, they did not campaign on this. They do not have a mandate. Call an election.
That's right. Sarah Hoffman is the opposition NDP's shadow minister of hospitals and surgical facilities.
What the minister calls flexibility is American-style, two-tiered Trump health care in the province of Alberta.
The government says more private surgeries will cut costs and shorten wait times. But the plan comes as a scathing report on another experiment in private medicine has been released by the province's fiscal watchdog. Auditor General Doug Wiley says the privatization of medical labs in 2023 was short-lived and costly.
When procurement, governance, and accountability breaks down, Albertans always pay the price.
Wiley says the failed experiment cost taxpayers tens of millions of dollars while slowing down test times and adversely impacting patients. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
A lot of people are talking about the white glove auction of Hudson's Bay Company art last night. 27 paintings were sold. They were considered to be the company's most valuable art, and they went for considerably more than estimated, $5.9 million in total.
Auctions theater, and that was great theater.
That is Robert Heffel, vice president of the Heffel Auction House. It held multiple auctions last night, and there was a lot of Canadian art on the block, including two pieces by Sir Frederick Banting. Yes, that Frederick Banting.
Banting, of course, was the famous Canadian who co-discovered insulin. He was a very good painter. He painted with A.Y. Jackson, the Group of Seven. when he retired from being a famous scientist, he wanted to become a full-time painter, but unfortunately he passed away at a young age in a plane crash.
On one painting trip, Banting sailed through the eastern Arctic with A.Y. Jackson. He painted a glacier off the south shore of Bylot Island. It was not part of the HBC sale, but it still managed to fetch $110,000. That is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, we are going to be in for a nice clear day in Winnipeg. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, your morning show on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Already, we are at 1 degree in Winnipeg. I know that doesn't sound very exciting, but it's close to the warm spot that we have right now. And we also are staring down a really mild weekend ahead. This hour on the program, with winter on the horizon after that wild weekend, you know it's going to come. How's the city planning on tackling homelessness, especially now that these new encampment restrictions have begun this week? That new bylaw went into place. Mayor Scott Gillingham will be here live for his monthly interview. We'll talk about that and more, so stay tuned. Also this hour on the program, we're going to meet the federal ombudsperson for the victims of crime in this country to hear his insight on how the justice system can better support sexual assault survivors. A special task force spent a full year learning how the courts have failed sex assault survivors. Today, the recommendations come out, and we will have a first look at what that looks like and what they are. So stay tuned. That's at 7:40. Right now, we go to Heather Wells for other news and headlines.
Good morning. A former golf course near Winnipeg, purchased in 2021 with money Peguis First Nation received as reparation for broken treaty promises, is now mostly in the hands of a property developer. That developer, Andrew Marquis, used to advise Peguis and its real estate trust. We're going to hear what happened coming up. As well, some businesses hit by a string of arsons in Winnipeg are feeling a little more at ease today. After a 6-month investigation, police have arrested a 35-year-old man on a total of 22 charges. Police say 11 properties were damaged, some multiple times. More on those stories coming up in our next news at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Weather-wise, 1 degree in Winnipeg. As I mentioned, our high today is going to be 4. It will be clear this morning. By the weekend, though, we could be seeing highs around 5 degrees. In Brandon right now, mainly clear. It's -5. Your winds are west at 10. You're going to head for a high today of 5 degrees. So it'll be already nice for you today. And then if we look at Thompson, light snow, and your story is different. It's -4 now, and your temperature is going to fall to about -8 this afternoon. The commute is fine. Call us if not, 788-3093. Well, up first this half hour on the program, ongoing coverage of something that we have been talking about, and that has to do with ethics and law enforcement. As you have been hearing in the news this week, Constable Elston Bostock, a Winnipeg police officer of 22 years, pleaded guilty to a breach of trust, theft, and indignity to human remains. And I should say, as you've been hearing in the news this month, he admitted to stealing drugs from a crime scene, bribing other officers to fix traffic tickets as well. And while Bostock still faces other charges, his guilty plea has put a spotlight on the Winnipeg Police Service as a whole. It's raised questions about how many officers took bribes over the years and why some officers looked the other way and didn't report him sooner. Now, we've heard the saying, of course, it's just a few bad apples. Our next guest says that is all it takes to spoil a bunch. Neil MacArthur is the director of the Centre for Professional and Applied Ethics at the University of Manitoba. He's here via Zoom. Good morning.
Good morning.
How do you meaningfully instill ethics into an organization? Especially yeah, please.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. It's definitely not easy. It's I would say it's a holistic task, and it's something that you have to be proactive about. I think that trying to deal with it after the fact by punishing the bad apples, the wrongdoers, is not going to accomplish the task.
What do you do after the fact, though? Because that's the moment that the Winnipeg Police Service finds itself in. We've heard the chief talking about, let's remember all the people that are there that are doing good. But also he talked about leadership and how he was going to relook at sort of who's leading to understand ethics. So what are the ways forward here?
Well, I think that, yeah, I think it's not too late. I think that if you look at some of the examples that, we have that have been really successful, such as Norway and other European countries, what they do is they make sure that ethics is part of the training. So really what you want to do is start this early enough that, recruits and people who are going through the training process have ethics as really an integral part of that training process. And also you want to make sure that, that again, you're not just dealing with this after the fact, that you have, right now, what we have is an investigative unit that goes after people who have done wrong, but you also need people within the police force whose job is to promote ethics on an ongoing basis.
To promote ethics in what way? And when you say ethics training, is this just ongoing workshops or running scenarios during recruitment about what could happen in unethical situations and making sure that's just, happening all the time?
Yeah, the first step, I think, is just making sure people really clearly understand the rules. I think the evidence shows that the most effective ethics training is just making sure that people are very clear what is and what isn't permissible. And because, obviously police officers face very complicated situations. And so, yeah, I think that, as you mentioned, scenario planning can be really helpful. There are different techniques you can use for sure. Scenario planning, and annual workshops. The police services in Europe use workshops that happen on an annual basis. So this is not just one and done. This is not just something you get during your initial training, but it's something that is, again, as part of instilling it as part of the culture and really changing the culture. It's got to be something that you're always talking about.
What are some of the influences that would drive someone to do something considered unethical?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think that for police, police are no different maybe than people like ethics professors in that when you're doing things that you think promote the public good and promote ethics, police officers are obviously risking their lives and doing a lot of things that benefit the public. And so, I think there is a psychological phenomenon where you can therefore give yourself some permission to violate ethical norms if you think that you're contributing in other ways. And so I think you kind of have to learn to correct against that bias, that just because, I've done this really great thing for the public or I've risked my life for the public, that doesn't necessarily give me permission to fix a traffic ticket.
That is psychologically interesting, what you've said there.
Yeah, I think, as I say, it's not unique to police officers. Ethics professors are a studied group who are very subject to this as well. So, it's an issue yourself.
In the case of Bostock, we know that he wasn't the only police officer accused of bad behavior. How do we turn bystanders or helpers into people who report unethical behavior? Those that might have known something was going on but didn't come forward?
Yeah, I think that again speaks to the culture and what happens to those people and how those people are perceived within the organization. So, if you have people whose job it is to promote ethics who are in high positions, and if you're focusing on training leaders, then people know within the force that this is not going to be a career ender, that this is going to be something that actually helps them in their career if they speak out and do the right thing.
And I just want to acknowledge here, because sometimes it can be easy to sit in hindsight and also over here and say, don't be a bystander, step up, step in. But people are probably going through the process where, these are real people worried about their careers as well, their life. Can a culture shift change that? Do you have to have things in place that say, we want you to come forward, you will not, be reprimanded, or so to speak, even if you're going to culturally you could culturally face some risk?
Yeah, it's very easy, I think, for me as a sort of ethics observer to sort of sit back and say, oh, well, just change the culture. I don't want to minimize this. This is not easy. And obviously the police depend for their lives on coherence. And so I think what you have to do is change what makes the force cohere. If what makes the force cohere is, going along to get along and turning the other cheek, then obviously that's going to be what bystanders do. But if you make it clear that what holds this force together is everybody being ethical and doing the right thing and saying when they see something, and that's going to promote their career, that's going to, that's what their peers want. I mean, I think making people understand that this is what their peers want. They do not want you to look the other way. And I think that's when the leadership has to take the responsibility to say, this is what we want, and this is what's going to get you promoted. This is what's going to get us promoted.
How does recruiting play into what we're talking about when you think about where, this kind of, we're building a culture or a cultural norm for a system, in this case, a police service, any police service. How does it start at the recruitment point?
I think it does, although I don't think people, think to themselves, well, I really want to fix traffic tickets, so maybe I'm going to be a cop. I think that the recruiting process is important. I think you're catching people when they step up into the police service. You're catching people who really want to do the right thing and help the public and are willing to risk their lives to do that. So, I think that you definitely want to catch people early and want to make sure that you make people understand what a good police officer is and what they do. But I do think that, it's a pretty self-selecting group, and I think they're a group of people who, generally want to do the right thing. So you just have to make sure that they step into a culture where that's rewarded.
Lots of value in this today, Neil. Thank you very much for your time.
It's always a pleasure.
That's Neil MacArthur with us live, the director of the Centre for Professional and Applied Ethics over at the University of Manitoba. It is now 7:21 a.m. and we're going to be going to sports shortly with Scott Reguer, who's going to be joining us. To get us there, though, one of my absolute faves, Charlotte Cardin. I always just totally turn it up so loud in the car. This tune is called Feel Good.
Y'a ma main dans la fenêtre, Titanic. Y'a des choses que je comprendrai jamais, pyramide. Et j'ai pensé tomber contre toi, italique. J'entends toujours le son de ta voix qui m'invite, mon amour. I've been away, now I'm back to you. C'est arrivé, you make me feel good. La main sur ma taille, ensemble dans le taxi, c'est vraiment super sexy. You make me feel nice, frisson every time. J'y ai pensé 1000 fois. If you want me, dis-le-moi. You make me feel good. 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 On arrive à la falaise iconique. Plus y a de danger, plus je me sens à l'aise, ironique. Et j'ai pensé mourir avec toi, si Anide. J'entends toujours le son de ta voix qui m'invite, mon amour. I've been away, now I'm back to you. C'est arrivé, you make me feel good. La main sur ma taille, ensemble dans le taxi, c'est vraiment super sexy. You make me feel nice, frisson every time. J'y ai pensé 1000 fois. If you want me, dis-le-moi. You make me feel good. La main sur ma taille, ensemble dans le taxi, c'est vraiment super sexy. You make me feel nice, frisson every time. J'y ai pensé 1000 fois. If you want me, dis-le-moi. You make me feel good. La main sur ma taille, ensemble dans le taxi, c'est vraiment super sexy. You make me feel nice, frisson every time. J'y ai pensé 1000 fois. If you want me, dis-le-moi. You make me feel good. 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 Good.
Friday music on a Thursday. I love that. Charlotte Cardin with Feel Good. It is 7:24 a.m. We have morning sports coming up in a moment. We're going to talk about the NHL. And even though they weren't playing, the Jets made news. Scott's going to explain that in a few minutes. But still ahead in the program, we continue to remember Ian Ross this morning. He died suddenly yesterday at the age of 57, but he left us with so much.
People want to hear our stories right now because Indigenous stories and identity are deeply wrapped up in Canadian identity, right? Like this place we live in, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, all three of those words come from Indigenous words, right? Like it's there, but I don't feel that Canadians have yet fully embraced who we are. We're starting to.
Hearing the voice there of Ian Ross talking about some of the way forward in this country. A visionary, generous, and kind is how he's being remembered this morning. You might remember him from his radio career here on Information Radio, starting with his character, Joe from Winnipeg, one of the early things he did. But also he went on to do so much and mentor so many people, the Creator Circle over at RMTC. So we will be hearing more about Ian Ross, his life, his legacy. The community is still coming to terms with the loss of him. He died suddenly yesterday. He is a Governor General award-winning Indigenous playwright from here in Manitoba. Next, as I mentioned, Scott Regier does join us with sports. Hey there, Scott. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Marcy.
Good. NHL, let's start there. What is the news the Jets were making?
Well, the Jets announced yesterday they've assigned Captain Adam Lowry to a new 5-year contract extension. So another core piece locked up by the team that has also signed key players such as Kyle Connor, Dylan Sandberg, Gabe Vilardi this past offseason. Lowry was in the last year of his contract and would have been a free agent by season's end. Given some of the players Winnipeg has lost in free agency, some fans might have been getting a little nervous. He may have tested the waters when the season was done. Lowry, though, didn't seem concerned. I mean, even back in September prior to the season, this is what he said.
You know, I don't have any concerns about, kind of where we're at. I said it before, I love playing in Winnipeg. I don't see an issue with us getting something done eventually.
Lowry, a 2011 draft pick, has spent his entire career with the Jets. Given that his contract will take him to the age 38, there's a pretty good chance he's going to finish his career with the team, too. Winnipeg is back in action tomorrow night when they will welcome back Nick Ehlers for the first time since leaving for the Carolina Hurricanes in the offseason.
And to soccer, where it was a big day away from the pitch as well.
It was, with FIFA's final rankings coming out ahead of the World Cup draw. Canada has moved up one spot to 27th in the world, although there's no way, Marcy, of determining yet who the Canadians will face next summer. We do know who they would like to avoid. There will be 4 pots of 12 countries each. Canada's in pot 1 and will not face, in the opening phase of the World Cup anyway, anyone from that pot. So none of FIFA's top-ranked sides, Spain, Argentina, etc. But looking at the other pots, there are some obvious opponents Canada would prefer not to have to face. In pot 2, there's Croatia and Morocco, both of whom made the semifinals of the last World Cup. In pot 3, there is Norway. No one wants to face the planet's best goal scorer, Erling Haaland, and the Norwegians right now. And in pot 4, which will be determined next March in a last-chance playoff, the possibility of Italy, 4-time World Cup champions, remains. So we'll have a lot more clarity December the 5th when the World Cup draw takes place. Meantime...
And that's it! History made for the Vancouver Rise, your first ever Northern Super League champions!
That's CBC's call of the Vancouver Rise winning the Northern Super League title. If you took in the game last weekend, you were far from alone. The ratings are in, and 1.1 million Canadians took in at least part of that match on one platform or another. That is excellent news for women's footy in this country.
Let's finish with curling, where we're heading into a big weekend for the sport.
Yeah, the Roar of the Rings takes place in Halifax, Marcy. By the end of the tournament, we'll know who will represent Canada at the upcoming Olympics. Rachel Homan's rink is a big favorite, of course, to wear the maple leaf again in the women's event. But her lead, Sarah Wilkes, says the burden of expectation brings with it added stress. A registered psychotherapist in her day job, Wilkes explains how she copes with that.
When I notice that I am getting stressed, it's just like saying to myself, like, yeah, you're stressed. And that makes sense because you have a lot on the go, right? So being kind to myself, as cliche as it sounds, like engaging in some sort of self-care, working out, going for a walk with the dogs, reading a book, whatever that is for me. And it looks different for everyone. Just really giving myself permission to do that in the moment, to like kind of bring the thermometer down so that I can like re-engage and not be so stressed.
Sarah Wilkes, one of many reasons Rachel Homan's rink is a big favorite to represent Canada at the Winter Games. As for the men, that is expected to be a tighter competition. Brad Jacobs, Brad Gushue, Kevin Cooey, they're all involved. They've all been to the Olympics before. Gushue and Jacobs, of course, having won gold there. So the Roar of the Rings gets underway on Saturday. I'll have a full setup tomorrow. Plenty of Manitoba content, I think, about Matt Dunstone on the men's side, Carrie Anerson on the women's side. So lots to talk about on that front tomorrow.
All right, Scott, we'll talk to you then.
You bet.
That's Live with CBC Sports. Scott Ricker, he's here every morning. Still ahead, after 7:30, we are going to be talking about a special task force that spent a full year learning how the courts in this country have failed sex assault survivors. Today, they have their recommendations that come out about how to change that. We will hear from the federal ombudsperson who released that report. Stay tuned. That's live after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, nice clear sky out there. It is 1 degree. We're going to see a bit of a westerly breeze pick up around noon today, and temperature similar to yesterday, a high of 4. A former golf course near Winnipeg, purchased with money Peguis First Nation received as reparation for broken treaty promises, is now mostly in the hands of a property developer. As CBC's Bartley Kivas reports, that developer used to advise Peguis and its real estate trust.
Peguis First Nations Real Estate Trust bought the former Meadows Golf Course in East St. Paul in 2021. The trust used $10 million in treaty land entitlement money and also took out a $5.5 million loan. According to a purchase and development agreement obtained by CBC News, the trust defaulted on that loan in November 2024. That deal shows most of the Meadows is now controlled by Andrew Marquis, a Winnipeg developer who used to advise both Peguis and its real estate trust. The loan the trust defaulted on was from a company controlled by Maureen Diamond, who's married to Marquis. Peguis lawyer John Galis is questioning the deal.
It doesn't appear to me to be a fair transaction.
Greg Stevenson, the former chair of the real estate trust, says it had no choice but to make this deal. Stevenson said no lender would take on the debt.
This was the only solution we could have had. Nobody would touch us.
According to the agreement, Marquis has up to 7 years to pay the trust $10 million. Marquis's lawyer Kevin Toyne said in a statement the deal is like any other commercial transaction. Toyne said Marquis has assumed all the debt and the development risk. Diamond declined to comment. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Some Winnipeg business owners are breathing a sigh of relief. Police have charged 35-year-old Jesse Wheatland with a string of arson attacks in and around downtown. The fires happened at 11 locations. Some buildings were attacked multiple times, including the constituency offices of 2 NDP cabinet ministers and several restaurants and bars. Nicola Maharaj runs Commonwealth Kitchen and Bar, one of the businesses that was hit.
Relief, because one of our fears obviously is reopening and then the same thing happens again. So knowing that the person who's linked to a bunch of them is off the streets definitely helps.
Police say the arrest is not connected to a recent string of extortion attempts and arsons at businesses. A First Nation-owned mining project is being touted as a game changer, but it needs support. Norway House Cree Nation purchased the former Monago nickel project last year. It has since been rebranded as a critical minerals project after the discovery of an abundance of platinum group metals. Jason Rasevich is president of the Anishinaabe Business Professional Association.
This will be an important test case for just the general idea that, I've seen this word of economic reconciliation utilized in corporate Canada's marketing material, but where does it sit when it's time to walk the talk?
The group is asking both the federal and provincial governments for $180 million to get this project off the ground. Rasevich says the project will be more viable than Ontario's Ring of Fire because of its existing infrastructure and shovel readiness. There are multiple reports the United States and Russia have quietly drawn up a plan for peace in Ukraine. But the EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, is making it clear this deal is nowhere near done.
What we as Europeans have always supported is a long-lasting and just peace, and we welcome any efforts to achieve that. Of course, for any plan to work, it needs Ukrainians and Europeans on board.
The Financial Times and Reuters news agency have seen a draft plan. It would require Ukraine to surrender territory and cut the size of its military in half. In the past, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called those conditions non-starters. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Today is Transgender Day of Awareness. It marks lives of trans and gender diverse people lost to violence and other harms. Several events are being held across Manitoba. Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera says the NDP government stands with the trans community.
It's really important for Manitobans to continue to be focused on being unified, standing up for human rights, and celebrating what makes us strong as a province, and that is our diversity, and that includes our gender diversity.
Premier Wab Kinew confirms his government will reintroduce legislation to deter the use of notwithstanding clause targeting the rights of trans people and vulnerable groups. Winnipeg's arts world is mourning the loss of a giant. Indigenous playwright and author Ian Ross died yesterday. For years, he was a CBC columnist known as Joe from Winnipeg. Ross was the first Indigenous playwright to win the Governor General's Award in 1997. He's been a mentor to many. Ian Ross was back on Information Radio this past September talking about a festival he had started, Pimoteowen, a festival of new work.
Part of my responsibility, I feel, is to pass on my knowledge experience, right? But just as I can't take all the credit for that, I had two wonderful teachers. I've only really had two creative writing teachers, and one was Carol Shields and the other was George Amabile.
Ross says in recent years he was thrilled to see the growth in Indigenous playwrights, poets, authors, and actors. Ian Ross was 57, and you can hear more from him and that interview he had with Marcy just this past September coming up in the next hour right here on Information Radio.
Yeah, it rings almost haunting, but I'm just grateful to have it because listening to it this morning again, he almost, he went back for whatever reason in that interview and talked about how he started, how things have changed. He talked about our community. So much to listen to and still to learn from him now. I feel like grateful that we have his words today.
Absolutely. That's the exact word, grateful. Yeah.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
All right, let's get into the forecast here. Winnipeg's 1 degree. Brandon mainly clear and -5. Thompson light snow and -4. Why don't we start up north? You're going to get colder, Thompson. You're going to head to -8 today as your temperature dips. Cloudy, 60% chance of light snow. Brandon, as I mentioned, -5. You're going to get warmer, a high of 5 degrees above today. So nice sunny day for you in Westman. And here in Winnipeg, we are at 1, as I mentioned. It'll clear this morning. Our high is going to be right around -4. Winds will be west 20 to 40. They'll clear up around noon as well. So it's going to get even calmer this afternoon. Let's get into the morning commute. That's also been calm. 788-3093, though, if you have anything that you'd like to report. Well, next on the show, we continue our series on how the legal system treats survivors of sexual violence. If you were with us here on the show last week, we heard from survivors who described a system where there was no justice. Most of the accused are not charged with a crime, and few are convicted. Here are some of the people we heard from.
I know myself, and I know who I am, and I'm not a liar. I'm not out here saying that this person assaulted me. For what? That person sexually assaulted me. That is what happened to me. He did that.
We are the ones that have been hurt. We have the greatest amount of skin in the game, quite frankly.
People do not understand what it's like to be a woman in a situation with a person that can overpower you. All these things go through your mind. And it's how do I stay alive?
Those are the voices of Jewel Pierre Rosselli, as well as Alexa Barkley and Isabel Daniels, part of Donna Carrera's report last week, one of our CBC producers. Well, yesterday, a specially appointed federal task force released the results of their investigation into this. Their report is called Rethinking Justice for Survivors of Sexual Violence. They identified key failures in the justice system, and they have 43 recommendations for change. Dr. Benjamin Roebuck is the federal ombudsperson for victims of crime. They oversaw the task force, and I'm pleased to say he joins us this morning via Zoom. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I watched you reacting to hearing some of the voices of the women we had here on our CBC Manitoba airwaves. I know yesterday when this was released, you said when it comes to dealing with sex assault cases, quote, the justice system is in open disrepute, end quote. Tell me what you mean by that and what was resonating around when you were listening here.
Thank you. Over the past 18 months, our team has been listening to survivors across the country and speaking with stakeholders who support survivors and are working on the ground. And we heard so many experiences with the justice system that were painful. And one of the saddest things I think that we heard too often was that the experience that some survivors had had with the justice system was more painful and problematic for them than having been sexually assaulted. And that's not what justice looks like. And we know that we can do better. And so we've heard people in the justice system who, whether it was a friend or somebody coming to them that would advise them, I'm not sure if I would report. And that's something that needs to change. We want people who do want to pursue justice through that system to be protected and treated fairly. And we've made recommendations to help that happen.
So let's get into some of those. So we did talk to a survivor last week. She said she felt she wasn't believed, just to reiterate that, because she was too scared to fight back. What does your report say about the need for those in the justice system to learn what consent looks like?
That's a great question. I think we deal exceptionally with myths and stereotypes about sexual violence. There's all kinds of things that people believe that the Supreme Court has actually said aren't valid lines of questioning or reasoning, and they shouldn't be part of the justice system. Things like making assumptions about what it looks like when somebody is afraid, or what it looks like when somebody's been sexually assaulted, and their reactions and choices, that it's not predictable. And so when people describe what's happened to them and how they've reacted, it's really important that those reactions aren't in any way used to discredit what they're saying. And so a better understanding of trauma and being trauma informed throughout the system will make things safer.
You also make recommendations that speak to stereotypes around racialized and Indigenous women. And again, last week, we did speak to a survivor who said that she felt especially vulnerable as an Indigenous woman, both during her assault, but also during the police interview afterward. What does your report specifically say should change to improve that, to fix that?
We map out our whole investigation along the calls for justice from the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls and Two-Spirit people. And our first recommendations in the report come back to those calls for justice and better Indigenous involvement in the oversight of policing sexual assault cases, and ensuring that sexual assault evidence kits are available in remote northern communities and Indigenous communities, and really examining how we can better challenge the normalization of sexual violence that's happened. We were really pleased to learn from Indigenous leaders across the country who are tackling sexual violence, and I think there's a lot more potential for collaboration and learning that can happen so that those calls for justice are realized.
What are the mental health supports like for survivors? What did you learn there, and what would you recommend?
This is an area that's very challenging. Part of the reason we launched the investigation was a complaint to the Ombuds office from a survivor who had 7 years of counseling records subpoenaed by the person who harmed her. And effectively, she described that experience as suddenly feeling like her counselor had been taking notes for the defense for 7 years. And she questioned why the government would allow the person who harmed her to benefit in any way from her having to seek help. And so we have a whole chapter that's dedicated to better understanding this barrier and digging into the protections that are currently there for counseling records, because there's a screening regime. They're not automatically admitted, but we're confident that Canadians largely don't know that that sexual assault records can be subpoenaed in court from a counselor or a therapist. And it's an area where we recommend more protection because it cuts off people from access to life-saving mental health care at a time where we know predictably that it's most needed.
I find that shocking. I was one of the Canadians that did not know that. Your report calls for I know we won't get through all the recommendations. I'm just pulling out, I'm sorry, I apologize for moving one subject to the other, but I want to get some of this out.
Good.
The report calls for independent legal counsel for victims. Why is that?
Yeah, so we know that in the criminal justice system, the charter rights of the accused are clearly mapped out in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And we know that survivors also have charter rights, but they're not as clearly defined. They're not written in explicitly. And so when the right to life, liberty, and security of the person is at stake for survivors, they should have representation that can help to advance their interests in the justice system. And so currently across Canada, we have programs that provide independent legal advice to survivors of sexual violence. Often people can get up to 4 hours of independent legal advice. And if their records are subpoenaed, or then they can have independent legal representation at a hearing, and they can have their own lawyer. And what we've seen is that legal representation, when the stakes are so high and the personal interests of survivors are affected, matters a lot. And we think that it's not reasonable that the person who's caused the harm or is alleged to have caused the harm is guaranteed that they'll be told what their rights are, and they're guaranteed that they'll be offered a lawyer, and not to provide that to people who've been harmed when the stakes are also high for them. There's a lot of consequences that can happen as they pass through the system. So we'd like to see better protection there.
So 43 recommendations for changes. What happens next, and what powers do you have to make sure the federal government can implement these recommendations? And because some of them would mean changing the criminal code in this country.
Yeah, so the Office of the Federal Ombudsperson for Victims of Crime, the Ombudsman is appointed by the Prime Minister and Cabinet. And we have authority to require a government response when we make recommendations. And so within 6 months, the federal government will be required to provide a written response to the 43 recommendations explaining what they're going to do and why. And any recommendations that they're not adopting, they'll also have to explain why not. And then that allows for public accountability and transparency. But we are quite hopeful and pleased to see the engagement already with the recommendations we've made, including for legislative reform. And we're hopeful to see some legislative change on some of our proposals soon.
Benjamin Roebuck, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the work you do.
That is Benjamin Roebuck, the federal ombudsperson for victims of crime. For more on the story and for more on these the new report that just came out, Rethinking Justice for Survivors of Sexual Violence, identifying key failures in our justice system here, you can go to cbc.ca/Manitoba. It is now 13 minutes to 8 o'clock on 89.3, and we're going to switch gears here now and talk to our mayor, Scott Gillingham, who's back for our monthly check-in. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
You're not going to be surprised where we're starting because you have a new laws on the book, new bylaw for new encampment restrictions. We're just a couple of days in. This is for where encampments can be set up. So if you're near schools, playgrounds, rec facilities, just for the sake of listeners, people will have to move on during the day. What's this week looked like as you've rolled this out?
So far, so good. We launched the enforcement of these new rules on Monday, and within 2 days, we had 2 encampments cleaned up and the people living in the encampments into housing. The city's working in partnership with our outreach providers, Main Street Project, and others who may have housing, and it's still in accordance, really kind of tucking this in under and in accordance with the partnership we have with the province's Your Way Home plan.
What housing are people being moved to right now? Like, do you have spaces on standby? Can you share that?
I don't know specifically what housing it was, but I do know that again, the province and the outreach providers, including Main Street Projects, St. Boniface Street Links, they all have access to housing units. Not a lot of them, and that's the challenge. We don't have enough housing units, but we all partner together to find out where possibly we can move people into. The goal really of this new policy, Marcy, is not to push people down the road. That from one tent to another. The goal ultimately is to get people into housing with the supports.
So if we don't know where they've gone, how do we know that they have supports around? Or are we just leaning on the expertise of the people from the province that are moving them to move them to proper spaces?
That's right. The partnerships are so important. So the City of Winnipeg, as I said, we fund outreach providers. And so it's those outreach providers that have access to the housing. And again, everyone's working together to provide the support. So those people that are moved into housing will have the supports required and available, or should have the supports required and available to make sure that they can be successfully housed. And then if they need to move into addiction treatment, whatever the case would be, those supports are part of the whole process here.
Will more bylaw officers be needed in the future, do you think? When you think about, right now there's only 2.
Possibly, but we're just, I think it's a good balanced approach that we're taking right now. Like I said, we started enforcement on Monday. 2 encampments were 2 places where the enforcement took place. Those encampments, the people got housing, and those places were cleaned up.
How worried are you as the weather gets colder about where these people are going to go during the day when it's minus 30?
Well, it's always a concern, and I think that's why the relationship that the outreach providers have with these individuals in encampments around the city is really important, so that they can get the people where they need to be in warm places. The City of Winnipeg, we fund 24/7 safe spaces as well. We fund 4 of them that provide kind of warm weather shelter for people during the day if needed.
Obviously, what would offset that is if we did have some things that other cities are doing. I know that this is, we've already heard from some councillors and such that are saying this isn't the right direction for Winnipeg. I want to know what your thoughts are on this, and I also want to know how open you are to changing things. And I'm talking about the zones where people could go. So in St. John, New Brunswick, they have adopted colored zones as part of Housing for All. So green zones is transitional housing sites. Yellow sites are where encampments are permitted temporarily. And then encampments can't go in red zones. So the idea is, I know you say you don't want people to go tent to tent. However, there are some housing advocates that are suggesting, even here in the city of Winnipeg, that why not? Well, as you said, we don't have the spaces, the transitional spaces all up and ready to go. Why wouldn't we have an organized sort of, I guess for the sake of the other, use the language from other cities, the yellow zone, where you would have supports there. The idea would be to go into transitional housing, but right now, at least we're moving you into an area where people's needs can be managed and such. Why wouldn't we go in that direction?
Well, first and foremost, I'm always open to ideas that are working in other jurisdictions. And so we have learned a lot from other jurisdictions, even in the encampment policy we brought in and the encampment protocols that we're implementing as well. But what the key here is to make sure that we are moving people ultimately into housing. That is the goal. And so the process we have right now, it's only week 1. It's working so far. It's early days. The protocol on how we enforce this new no-go zone policy in certain areas, it'll change. It'll evolve over time, inevitably, right, as we learn and adjust. But the more people we can get into stable housing with the supports that need to be successful is really it's the goal that everybody has. I think that's the important message here.
Especially though when people right now are being told, during the day, pack up and move. If you did have that sort of the encampment that is permitted temporarily with the eye to housing, that would at least give them a place to move to with support. So is that something you can commit to support, that exploring?
Well, right now we're exploring, some councils have brought forward the concept of a managed encampment site, which I think is similar to what you're talking about. Different cities do it a little bit, be different from city to city. And we're exploring that. I'm open to that discussion. A couple of my council colleagues have been, calling for that. And like I said at the outset here, I really am. I think we all should be open to what can work for the people of this community.
Let's move to another topic. Yesterday, the Winnipeg Police had the press conference about this arrest in connection with arsons in the city. Police saying one man was responsible for the fires at the constituency offices of Family Minister Nahanni Fontaine and Homelessness and Addictions Minister Bernadette Smith, and then also several restaurants and offices downtown. What's your reaction as mayor to this arrest?
Well, I'm very pleased, obviously, that the arrest has been made. And I want to thank the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service and the Winnipeg Police Service, who work in a very, very integrated, coordinated fashion on these fires and these fire investigations. It's good news that someone has been arrested, and it's the result of a lot of extensive work by many different members of the fire service and the police service as well. And we heard yesterday at the news conference, I was there and made some comments. We heard that, it was several police officers in several different kind of departments, all kind of working together in a coordinated way to make sure that this arrest could happen. And this is good news. It's good news for restaurant owners. It's good news for the public. And 3 weeks ago, Marcy, we stood, I and myself and members of the police service and members of the fire paramedic service stood and made an announcement, just that the fact that we are working together and our fire paramedics and police services are working in a coordinated fashion to solve these matters. And here we are 3 weeks later with an arrest.
I do want to play a clip here. So you're mentioning Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service being there yesterday, of course. So this is Chief Christian Schmidt.
Insofar as anyone who sees someone actively entering a vacant building or removing boards from windows or doors from a vacant building, people need to call 911 in this situation and report the incident immediately.
So out of that, how's the city going to crack down on vacant buildings? We have a ton of them. What are the solutions? I know you've been looking at some of these things. Where are we at, and what are the solutions moving forward?
We'll have specific news to announce in the not too distant future here. I wish I could,
okay.
but in the not too distant future, we do take it very seriously. I want to thank Winnipeggers for their patience, but the work that we have been doing as a city is we're working not just with our fire paramedic service, as you heard Christian Schmidt there, Chief Schmidt there, but also with our bylaws officers and our water waste department of public works, but also with people like Daryl Warren, who kind of leads the William White Neighborhood Association,
and they've
others.
been concerned about vacant buildings for a long time. So when you say you're going to have news in the future, is it around something specific around vacant buildings?
Yes, and how the plan to really address vacant derelict buildings and reduce them. But the clip you just played, the chief talked about the boarded up buildings. What we did as a council is we brought in new rules not a while ago that make it more difficult to break into vacant and derelict buildings. Property owners that have a vacant building are required to use kind of stronger materials, longer screws. There's really an enhanced boarding requirement. Look, every one of those vacant and derelict buildings represents a space, a property that could be turned into housing. The first segment you and I talked about was about the fact that there's not enough housing for people. And here we have, at the same time, I think a solution to a part of our problem with vacant and derelict buildings across the city.
Is this a preview of what we're going to hear?
Stay tuned. No, but I've talked about that before. In all seriousness, Marcy,
yeah,
and I think it would make sense to the average person that we've got vacant buildings on one hand, not enough housing on the other. There's got to be a way to bring those two together. And that's really the goal for sure.
I literally have 30 seconds left, but when we're talking about buildings, I can't help asking, because you looked inside the renovations being done to the old Hudson Bay building this week. A lot of Winnipeggers, were driving by there wondering, how's it looking in there?
I'll just use the word amazing. I mean, such a historic building. It's amazing. What was really exciting to hear was there's about 140 people on site that are working there. 70% of them are First Nations people working there, doing a great job. And it's going to be an exciting project when it's all said and done.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
That is the mayor of the city of Winnipeg with our regular monthly interview here on CBC, Scott Gillingham. If you want to read more about any of the issues that we've been raising, CBC has ongoing coverage online at cbc.ca/Manitoba. To Heather now, speaking of ongoing coverage with our headlines.
Good morning. Well, a former golf course near Winnipeg purchased in 2021 with money Peguis First Nation received as reparation for broken treaty promises is now mostly in the hands of a property developer. That developer, Andrew Marquis, used to advise Peguis and its real estate trust. We'll hear more about what happened coming up. And today is Transgender Day of Awareness. The day marks lives of trans and gender diverse people lost to violence and other harms. Several events are going to be held right across the province. Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera says the NDP government stands with the trans community. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 8:30.
It is in Winnipeg 1 degree, and we're going to clear this morning. Our high is going to be 4. The commute has been really good. 788-3093, though. If not, up to 8 o'clock it gets busy, so let us know if you spot something. Could be a little bit tricky there. Greasy underfoot, maybe a little slippery. Partly covered highways with some snow out there, so take care. Also, Jason called from a cyclist to say that the Riverwalk path underneath the Donald Street Bridge is now open, by the way. The construction there is done if you're an active commuter. 788-3093 if you need us, as mentioned. And just to reiterate the news, a property developer who used to advise Peguis First Nation and its real estate trust now has control of most of an old golf course the trust acquired 4 years ago. We're going to tell you about a real estate transaction involving land the band acquired with money it received as reparations for broken treaty promises. Stay tuned, that's still ahead. Plus, we will remember playwright Ian Ross.
Today on Q. SmackDown Women's Champion! Natty Neidhart comes from a long line of wrestling legends. Bret Hart, Davey Boy Smith, Jim the Anvil Neidhart. But even with her family's success, Natty had to carve her own lane. She'll be here to talk about her new memoir, her family history, and the ups and downs of a life in the ring. Q with Tom Power. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland. And on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Rebecca Zandbergen. A lot of people love their pets, but some dogs really go that extra mile for their humans. The stories of Canadian dogs who have saved their owners' lives, often in unexpected ways, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Lawyers representing veterans say an amendment in a new federal bill covers up a decades-long mistake. That mistake led to veterans overpaying for long-term care, and this amendment could help the government avoid responsibility. The CBC's Kate McKenna has this exclusive story.
It's about miscalculating long-term care contributions.
Lawyer Malcolm Ruby says the federal government is trying to dodge responsibility for an expensive mistake.
Instead of owning up to their error, they're trying to change the rules after the fact.
He is co-counsel in a proposed class action, alleging veterans overpaid for long-term care for decades. Veterans' long-term care is subsidized. The law says they're only expected to pay an amount equivalent to the cost of room and board in the least expensive province or territory. But Ruby says Ottawa made a mistake. The government excluded the territories which cost less.
That resulted in overcharges, and they were fairly significant overcharges for individual veterans.
A CBC News investigation first revealed this discrepancy. At the time, then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said the federal government was looking into it.
The Minister of Veterans Affairs has asked her officials to investigate this matter.
A year later, buried in a 600-page bill, the Carney government proposed an amendment to exclude territories from the calculation retroactively. Ruby says this could eliminate the federal obligation to reimburse veterans who overpaid.
Retroactively changing legislation is like a thermonuclear weapon that the government has in litigation that no other litigant has.
Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne dismissed a question on why the government is doing this, but says the budget includes additional money to help veterans. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
There are multiple reports the United States and Russia have quietly drawn up a plan for peace in Ukraine. But the EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, says the deal is nowhere near done.
What we as Europeans have always supported is a long-lasting and just peace, and we welcome any efforts to achieve that. Of course, for any plan to work, it needs Ukrainians and Europeans on board.
The Financial Times and Reuters news agency have seen a draft plan. It would require Ukraine to surrender territory and cut the size of its military in half. In the past, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called those conditions non-starters. It is not yet clear if U.S. President Donald Trump backs this plan. Some of Israel's key allies are condemning the wave of settler violence in the occupied West Bank. U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee calls the most recent attacks terrorism. But as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urges security forces to crack down, many Palestinians say they are holding out little hope. Tom Perry has the story.
Mohammed Zabadi stands in front of a pair of delivery trucks burned and blackened down to their metal frames. The vehicles belong to a newly opened dairy where Zabadi works in Beit Lid in the occupied West Bank. Last week, the trucks were set alight by a mob of masked Israeli settlers. Zabadi says he heard noise and saw workers running. He immediately closed the doors and made sure everyone was inside. The dairy is back up and running, but Zabadi worries the attackers could return. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has condemned the recent spate of settler violence and urged authorities to pursue the perpetrators. But to many Palestinians in the West Bank, that's just talk. The town of Sinjil, north of Ramallah, sits behind a high barbed wire fence put in place, Israeli security forces say, to protect a nearby highway. People in the town say it's cut them off from their fields and hasn't protected them from harassment and attacks from nearby settlements. Sinjil's mayor, Motaz Tafsha, doesn't put much stock in the Israeli prime minister's calls for a crackdown.
No, that's not true. Benjamin Netanyahu, with his team, they protect them.
Netanyahu's coalition government includes far-right parties that are staunch backers of the settler movement. And despite the prime minister's tough words, human rights groups and the United Nations say Israeli security forces have, until now, turned a blind eye to settler violence or actively supported it. Tom Perry, CBC News, Sinjil in the occupied West Bank.
The clock is now ticking on the 30-day deadline for the U.S. Justice Department to release the Epstein files. U.S. President Donald Trump signed the order forcing their release last night. Willie Lowry is following the story from Washington. Willie, the bill was passed with overwhelming support for transparency, but some lawmakers and advocates are already pointing to a loophole. Tell us more about this escape clause that the DOJ could use to keep sensitive files secret.
So with President Donald Trump's signature, the 30-day countdown officially started, meaning in a month's time, the Justice Department will have to release the documents it possesses on Jeffrey Epstein. But the anticipated deluge of information may not be as robust as some had hoped. The bill allows for the Justice Department to withhold information that pertains to ongoing investigations. Also under the bill, the Trump administration is allowed to withhold information that could identify victims as well as images that involve child sexual abuse.
The timing here is critical. Trump has ordered an investigation into 3 prominent Democrats just as this bill was about to pass. How do critics connect the timing of those new investigations to the White House's ability to redact material?
So just a few days ago, Trump ordered Attorney General Pam Bondi to open investigations into several high-profile Democrats, including former President Bill Clinton and former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers. Trump also singled out billionaire donor Reid Hoffman. Now, these investigations could give the Justice Department cause for withholding some of the documents. Republican Representative Thomas Massey, who helped shepherd the bill through Congress, says he's not too concerned.
There is an exception for ongoing investigations, but you can't have 2 or 3 ongoing investigations and claim that you're not going to release any of the Epstein files.
Epstein's victims are also calling for a full release of the documents.
Thank you, Willie.
My pleasure.
The CBC's Willie Lowry reporting from Washington. The Hudson's Bay Company may have shut its doors forever, but there are a lot of people who still want to own a piece of its history. Last night, HBC auctioned off some of its most valuable paintings, and the bidders collectively spent $5.9 million. The CBC's Michelle Song takes us through the highlights.
Selling now at Heffel's, the Churchill, $1.3 million and
Congratulations to your bidder, Marie Helen. 1 point.
The oil painting of the city of Marrakesh by Winston Churchill topped the bidding at an auction for some of the Hudson's Bay Company's most valuable artwork. All 27 paintings sold above their estimated prices. Robert Heffel is the vice president of the Heffel Auction House.
But that was pretty amazing. It was electric. It was definitely electric. Every piece did so extraordinarily well. A white glove sale is very rare in the auction world. A white glove sale means everything sold.
The paintings are just a small fraction of the thousands of artifacts owned by the Hudson's Bay. The now dissolved company started selling these pieces to help pay off its nearly $1 billion debt. But one high-profile item is awaiting a court's decision on Friday. The Royal Charter is the document that founded the Hudson's Bay Company in 1670, allowing HBC the power to act as both a business and a colonial government. Cody Grote is a history professor at Western University.
So this one document granted by the king at the time to a private corporation essentially said Indigenous sovereignty or Indigenous rights to the land don't exist, and instead we're going to give them to a business.
Two Canadian billionaire families are proposing a joint bid of $18 million for the document, and they say they will donate it to multiple Canadian museums and put in place a national consultation process including Indigenous communities. Michelle Song, CBC News, Toronto.
And later today in New York, a painting by the late Mexican artist Frida Kahlo could break auction records. The self-portrait El Sueño La Cama goes under the hammer at Sotheby's. Here is how Ana Distasi, the head of Latin American art at the auction house, describes the work.
Here, death is no longer tragic. It's tender. Not an ending, but an enduring presence. Frida Kahlo redefines surrealism. In her hands, even death becomes part of living.
The 1940 painting features Kahlo sleeping in a bed with a skeleton reclining on a top canopy above her. Sotheby's estimates it is worth as much as $60 million US. That is about $84 million Canadian. If this Kahlo goes for that much, it would make it the most expensive work by a female artist ever auctioned. And that is World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. Welcome to Thursday, and thanks for joining us on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app and YouTube. 8:10 is the time. 1 degree has been our temperature today. Well, this half hour on the show, a property developer that used to advise Peguis First Nation and its real estate trust now has control of most of an old golf course. But the golf course is one that the trust acquired 4 years ago. We're going to tell you about a real estate transaction involving land that the band acquired with money it received as reparations for broken treaty promises. So what's going on here? Bartley Kivas will explain. Also in this half hour, we will continue to remember Ian Ross, the Governor General's award-winning playwright, the man who on our airwaves here at CBC played the character Joe from Winnipeg back in the day and who had so much to share. We've dug some of his wisdom out of the archives and we will remember him. He died yesterday suddenly at the age of 57. Right now, let's go to Heather Welsh. She has other headlines right now. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, some businesses hit by a string of arsons in Winnipeg are feeling a little more at ease today. After a 6-month investigation, police arrested 35-year-old Jesse Wheatland on a total of 22 charges. Winnipeg police say 11 properties were damaged, some multiple times. We're going to hear from one property owner coming up. And a First Nation-owned mining project is being touted as a game changer. Norway House Cree Nation purchased the former Minago Nickel project last year. It has since been rebranded as a critical minerals project after the discovery of an abundance of platinum group materials. In fact, one expert says this project could be more viable than Ontario's Ring of Fire. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
-2 at the airport, 0 in the downtown for Winnipeg right now. We're going to head to a high of 4 degrees. Should be nice and clear this morning as it is right now. In Brandon, -6 currently. You're going to get to 5 today. And in Thompson, light snow and -4. On the commute, commute. Jason called. He's cycling. He said the Riverwalk path underneath the Donald Street Bridge is now open after a long stretch of construction, so you'll be able to move freely through there. Call us with any problems in your city, in Manitoba, or anything here in Winnipeg or on the highways. 788-3093. Well, let's get into this detailed story with Bartley, who's in studio. I'm going to mention some of the details here once again. A former golf course purchased with money that Peguis First Nation received as reparation for broken treaty promises is now mostly in the hands of a property developer. Now, that developer used to advise both the band and its real estate trust. Bartley Kivas is here to talk about the purchase and the sale of its former Meadows land. This is northeast of Winnipeg. And it's a story published today as well by him and his colleague, Joanne Levasseur, and you can find that online. But Bartley's here to talk us through it. Hi there.
Good morning.
So where specifically is the Meadows land?
Well, this is a former golf course northeast of Winnipeg in the arm of East St. Paul. It's about 180 acres just north of the Perimeter Highway, east of Highway 59. In 2021, Peguis First Nations Real Estate Trust purchased this land using $10 million in treaty land entitlement funds. Now, that's money Peguis received as reparations for broken treaty promises. The real estate trust also borrowed $5.5 million to pay for the rest of the land and prepare for development. And this loan came from a numbered company controlled by Maureen Diamond. And she's married to a Winnipeg developer named Andrew Marquis.
Now, remind listeners who Andrew Marquis is.
Well, Andrew Marquis is best known as as the owner of the Parker lands in Winnipeg. And he also used to advise both Peguis and its real estate trust. Now, according to documents obtained by CBC News and a report provided by Peguis' chief and counsel, Marquis earned at least $4.4 million for his work for the band and its trust between 2021 and 2023. Now, in a report Marquis wrote to the band's chief and counsel, he referred to his wife's company as a related company of his. His wife's company lent the Peguis Trust that $5.5 million at a 5.75% interest rate initially, and later that went up to 9.18%. Now, by November 2024, according to documents obtained by CBC News, the real estate trust received a default letter. In November 2024, the trust transferred control of 90% of the Meadows land to Marquis, according to a purchase and development agreement obtained by CBC News. And this was first reported by the media outlet Terra Indigena.
So what did Marquis pay for the land?
According to the agreement, Marquis has promised to pay Peguis First Nation Real Estate Trust $10 million within 7 years. He intends to build more than 2,100 residential units on the land. That is, once the RM of East St. Paul approves a residential development on this land. There's a moratorium and more development right now because East St. Paul can't treat any more sewage. Kevin Toyne, a lawyer for Marquis, said his client has assumed the debt on the land and all the responsibility for the development. But John Galis, a lawyer for Peguis First Nation, questioned the deal.
Why is he questioning it?
Well, remember Marquis used to do consulting work for Peguis? Well, back in September 2024, Peguis sued Marquis, alleging breach of fiduciary duty when he did that work for the band. Galis said he's upset that the Peguis First Nation Real Estate Trust sold 90% of the Meadows land to Marquis a couple of months after that legal proceeding commenced. Peguis retains control of about 10% of the land, including the site of a daycare it built there. Galis also said the deal does not seem fair.
What's particularly galling about this is this transaction took place after the litigation had been filed, so I don't know the reasons why the trustees felt that they needed to do this sale, or what the motivations were behind it. But it doesn't appear to me to be a fair transaction.
So what does the real estate trust have to say?
Well, my colleague Joanne Levasseur spoke to Greg Stevenson. He's the former chair of the Peguis First Nation Real Estate Trust. Stevenson said the trust could not find any lender to take over the loan from Diamond's company. Stevenson also said that Peguis chief Stan Bird interfered with the trust and wouldn't let the Meadows land be sold to another First Nation. Stevenson said the trust had no other option but to transfer the land to Marquis.
If everything fell apart, everybody loses, especially Peguis, because Peguis uses their $10 million of their TLE money. Whatever the loans are to cover anything and all the other costs, that's kind of irrelevant right now. But the main thing is either we keep the land and everybody that put money into it loses because the bank's going to foreclose on everything, or do we find a way to try extend it, and then we figure out a way how to keep working together for the community. this was the only solution we could have had, nobody would touch us.
Now, in correspondence with Stevenson, released by Peguis lawyer John Galis, Chief Stan Bird accused the trust of trying to shift the blame for the Meadows back onto the chief and council. And I have to add, Marquis says there was no threat of foreclosure.
What do other legal experts think about this deal?
Well, I spoke to a pair of lawyers who are experts in Indigenous governance, and I asked them to review the Meadows Purchase and Development Agreement. Corey Sheffman, who's with OKT Law, LLP in Toronto, he called the agreement unusual. Yvonne Guy Larocque, the founder of Howell and Larocque here in Winnipeg, said the deal between Marquis, his wife, and his former client, and that would be the Peguis Real Estate Trust, is unusual.
It's odd to see an advisor in that role to be so involved financially with their client. And in the end, these treaty land entitlement lands being essentially transferred to a non-Indigenous party defeats the purpose of the treaty land entitlement process in my mind.
John Galis, the Peguis lawyer, described the disposal of the land as history repeating itself. Galis also questioned why the Peguis Real Estate Trust used Marquis's wife's company as a lender in the first place.
You've got a property, you've got $10 million equity in it. You could go down to, you could go down to the Bank of Montreal. I feel pretty confident that they would lend you. They'd be more than happy to give you a mortgage.
Court documents. Maureen Diamond said she started her company to lend money to the trust, and she said she had no previous experience in private lending, and she declined further comment. Kevin Toyne, Marquis's lawyer, said there is nothing unusual about the deal at all. He said in the statement, the structure of the transaction and the transaction documents are consistent with commercial real estate transactions in Manitoba.
Bartley, thank you for taking us through all the details of this. Appreciate it.
You're more than welcome.
If you want to read about the story and his work, Bartley Kivas with Joanne Levasseur, please go to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. It is 8:20 right now on CBC. Thank you so much for joining us on 89.3. We're going to take a moment here just to remember someone that a lot of Manitobans this morning are thinking about, including me. Many people are mourning the loss of Governor General award-winning Indigenous playwright Ian Ross today. He died suddenly yesterday at the age of 57, the news coming late in the day. You might remember Ian for all kinds of reasons. Maybe you just knew him here in Manitoba. Maybe somewhere he instilled some humble words of wisdom along the way. He was smart and tough and kind and just such a talent as well. And it's a real loss for our whole community. A lot of people, though, are going to remember him for the airwaves right here on Information Radio on CBC, where he created his radio character, Joe from Winnipeg, a recurring character throughout the 1990s and early 2000s. We went into our archives. Here's some of what Joe from Winnipeg shared.
Hey, you guys, I'm Joe from Winnipeg. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the buffalo. Wow, I hear they got new $100 bills in circulation now. I say here because I doubt I'll see one for a while. And I'm not sure what the big deal is anyways. It's not like any place is going to accept them. Why am I talking about money right from the get-go? There's far more funner, interesting things to talk about, like the coming spring and all the puddles and the warmth and good things. Oh, and buffalo, right. So anyways, this little bit of wisdom comes from my friend Leslie, who heard it from her friend, who heard it somewhere else, and now you guys can hear it. You know, somebody told me they listened to me while they're in the shower. What's up with that? And why does that make me feel dirty? Anyhow, the amazing things about buffalo, besides them being good to eat, is that they do things like, if there's a drought, they'll dig with their hooves for water. Apparently cows don't do this. Or if there's a storm coming, they'll head towards it. Cows head for the fence. And buffalo can run longer than a horse. Cows can't do that. Floods come, cattle drown. Buffalo tend to find a way. So why am I picking on cows and tooting the horns of the buffalo? Well, the buffalo have a relationship with this land that's rooted, connected, and indigenous. Cows don't have that. Cows were transplanted here and need a lot of help surviving. And you know, some people believe that we're the buffalo, but we're becoming like the cows. All the effects of globalization as we buy more of the same things and think more like we're told to think. And as we're told more and more that we shouldn't be who we are, and that the things which make us strong and survive, like where we come from and what we believe and how we're shaped by the land we live on, aren't the ways to be. You know, I think we'll find ourselves getting in more and more trouble. Because if you look around, you don't see any buffalo anymore, but you do see a lot of cows. And I'm not picking on the poor beef farmers because they're having a rough enough go already. But you know, I do see more and more people looking for a better way to be. And I think being more like a buffalo is a step in the right direction. I'm Joe from Winnipeg. Miigwech.
Playwright Ian Ross in the role of Joe from Winnipeg. We couldn't resist going into our archives as we remember Ian Ross, who died yesterday at the age of 57. Now, another thing that Ian is going to be, of course, remembered for is beyond his body of work, the Pimoteowin Festival of New Work series at Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre. In its 5th year this year, it invites aspiring Indigenous playwrights, 6 of them this year, to create work. Just take a shot at it and to do their first ever read-throughs on stage. And in that role, Ian was the ultimate mentor. The last interview that I had the opportunity to do with Ian was in September of this year. It was all about that festival. It was, in fact, the morning after the event. He was here with one of the playwrights. But I went in this morning and I pulled this piece from that interview so we can hear more of Ian today. What he shares and what he shared almost hauntingly now feels a little bit like he spoke his own legacy.
The thing that I was amazed by last night that kind of hit me, and Tracy Niepenak, I'd give her a ride home last night. We were talking about this too. There were 10 Indigenous women actors on that stage last night. And I was talking about how when I started in theater professionally, we struggled to find 2 to be in one of my plays, right? But here we are, 35 years later, and things are evolving, getting better. And so that's a part of it, that challenge. But also, like I said, I know a lot of people, there are things in our community that we want to talk about, but just the nature of how things are today, they feel they can't because they're afraid, if I say something about this, like I'm going to get this person upset with me or... And so I think it gets bottled up. But that's what theater is great for. It allows you to experience and engage ideas. And it can change the way you see the world, the way you think. That's why I ended up becoming a playwright myself. Part of my responsibility, I feel, is to pass on my knowledge experience, right? But just as I can't take all the credit for that, I had 2 wonderful teachers. I've only really had 2 creative writing teachers, and one was Carol Shields and the other was George Amabile. And they both were that was their approach, right? Kind of be affirming, gentle. Doesn't mean you can't get really critical about things, but that I found helped me a lot.
I don't know if this is your word or not, but I think it's your word that it almost for you at this stage of your work becomes a bit fatherly. Is that your word?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Or even grandfatherly. I was in the Dollarama the other day and I had this stuff, and this older woman who's probably older than me, she comes up and she only had one item. She's like, "Grandpa, can I go in front of you?" I was like, "Grandpa?"
I was going to ask how that sat with you.
I'd love to be a grandpa.
Ian Ross gone too soon. He died yesterday at the age of 57. As we observe the news, here's William Prince in Breathless.
In this day and age, every road has been followed, every mistake's been made. But there's a lot to be desired, and I find myself inside memories still alive just behind my eyes. Seems the more I go, leaving home, looking for what I need's been buried in my soul. 'Cause I never heard a song quite like Elvis. Not much beats the sound of the pouring rain. And there's something in your kiss leaves me so helpless. You leave me breathless. You leave me breathless. So there's this voice inside, terrified, plagued with pride, resonating, sounding like my own. Then piece by piece, so suddenly no subtleties, your beauty, it can bring me to my knees. 'Cause I never heard a song sung quite like Elvis. Now much beats the sound of the pouring rain, and there's something in your kiss leaves me so helpless. You leave me breathless. You leave me breathless. I'm always wishing on the times we had, wishing I could get you back. I'm always wishing on the times we had, wishing I could get you back. I'm gonna get you back. 'Cause I never heard a song sung quite like Elvis. Not much beats the sound of the pouring rain, and there's something in your kiss leaves me so helpless, and I can't help but see you again. I can never see
William Prince and Breathless on CBC. Some music to absorb the loss of Ian Ross this morning. Marjorie Dahos is in studio. You know, Marjorie, I saw someone wrote in a note, you know, we're going to play this. We're pulling from archives as a send-off. And then I was looking it up and I thought, oh, is Ian moving and leaving Manitoba? And then I started this news just like came like a wall. That,
Yeah.
Quite a shock.
Absolutely a shock.
Yeah.
And our thoughts and, you know, reflecting this morning.
Yeah, with family, friends, community.
Yeah.
You are here because you're going to get in a conversation with the community. Let's switch gears completely because between 12:30 and 1, it's your call in. What's your topic today?
Well, is there a piece of retro technology that you keep hanging on to? So if you've noticed some things from the past starting to come back a little bit, been hearing about people using Walkmans, Discmans again, Polaroid cameras. So we're asking you today, is there a piece of retro technology that you can't let go of? Maybe you're a young person and you've rediscovered these different types of gadgets out there. We want to hear from you. We're going to have 2 photographers joining us on the show today from 2 different generations that still take pictures using analog. So we want to hear from you. Share your story. Tell us what it is that you're hanging on to. Give us a call after 12:30 on Radio Noon today.
Should be a busy one. Good topic. Thanks, Marge.
Thanks, Marcy.
Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is clear 0 right now. We'll see sun today, a bit of a breeze, and a temperature similar to yesterday, a high of 4. A former golf course near Winnipeg, purchased in 2021 with money Peguis First Nation received as reparation for broken treaty promises, is now mostly in the hands of a property developer. That developer, Andrew Marquis, used to advise Peguis and its real estate trust. The land is in East St. Paul. The trust transferred 90% of it in November 2024 to a company controlled by Marquis. Peguis retains 10% of it. Peguis lawyer John Galis questions the deal.
Relief because one of our fears.
I don't know the reasons why the trustees felt that they needed to do this sale, or what the motivations were behind it, but it doesn't appear to me to be a fair transaction.
In a statement, a lawyer for Marquis says the deal is like any other commercial transaction. The former chair of the Peguis Trust says it had no choice but to make the transfer because of debt incurred to pay for the Meadows land and interference from Peguis chief Stan Bird. In correspondence, Bird says the trust was trying to shift blame back to him. Some Winnipeg business owners are breathing a sigh of relief. Police have charged 35-year-old Jesse Wheatland with a string of arson attacks in and around downtown. The fires happened at 11 locations. Some buildings were attacked multiple times, including the constituency offices of 2 NDP cabinet ministers and several restaurants and bars. Nicola Maharaj runs Commonwealth Kitchen and Bar, one of the businesses that was hit.
Relief, because one of our fears obviously is reopening and then the same thing happens again. So knowing that the person who's linked to a bunch of them is off the streets definitely helps.
Police say the arrest is not connected to a recent string of extortion attempts and arsons at businesses. It's believed a First Nation-owned mining project could turn Manitoba into a hub of clean magnesium. Norway House Cree Nation purchased the former Monago nickel project last year. They have since rebranded it as a critical minerals project after discovering an abundance of platinum group metals. Jim Rondo is Major Projects Director for Norway House.
We found out that we had a treasure chest of all sorts of critical minerals and very obscure minerals that really makes the project much more valuable and unbelievably more attractive to produce.
Rondo says Norway House needs help to get the project to production. They have asked the federal and provincial governments for $180 million in total, and Rondo says the project could be making that amount every year by 2030. Today is Transgender Day of Awareness. It marks lives of trans and gender diverse people lost to violence and other harms. Several events will be held across Manitoba. Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera says the NDP government stands with the trans community.
It's really important for Manitobans to continue to be focused on being unified, standing up for human rights, and celebrating what makes us strong as a province, and that is our diversity, and that includes our gender diversity.
Manitoba Premier Rob Canoe confirms his government will reintroduce legislation to deter the use of the notwithstanding clause targeting the rights of trans people and vulnerable groups. Well, this winter, Plowy McPlowface and Sled Zeppelin, as well as Taylor Drift, could be making Winnipeg streets to plow streets, cleaning our streets. Mayor Scott Gillingham says we're going to learn more later today.
There's other cities that have named their snowplows, and what a fun way to just to kind of get kids involved in what goes on at the city of Winnipeg. And so we are going to ask the kids of Winnipeg to participate and help us name the city of Winnipeg snowplows.
Gillingham hopes to name 12 snowplows this year with the help of city children. They may move on and name sidewalk plows and sanding machines as well. Gillingham likes the suggestion Dale Plowerchuk in honor of former Jets, late Dale Howerchuk. Scotland was the first place to name its snowplows or gritters. That happened back in 2006. You can find more news updated throughout your day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
I didn't get that out of him in my interview.
I know. You know what? Can I tell you something?
Come from? Is that Meigs out there in the
That
news
was
center?
Megan. That was like maybe a year ago. The mayor was in the newsroom, and Megan said, we just heard this. I don't know if it was Calgary or Edmonton, but they were naming plows, and yeah. So I think there was a little bug put in his ear.
Love it. Love it. Great suggestions. I can't wait to see what the kids come up with. That's fun.
I like Sled Zeppelin.
I know, right? All right, Heather, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, speaking of Megan, let's do some thank yous here. Megan Ketchison and Heather Wells in our news department this morning. As well, I think that Aaron Broman is out there, so I'm just going to give thanks there. In addition, the associate producers for Thursday's show, Sierra Sanders, Chidi Akuma, Jenna Badosso, Jenna Magapito, reporter in unit, and producer Donna Carrero helping out with work today. Thank you all. Here in Studio 15, our live crew, our YouTube producer is Darren Marash. Our tech this morning is Josh Tyfair. Our director is May McKillop. Nellie Gonzalez is our show producer of Current Affairs Unit shows overall. Leif Larson is the senior producer of audio at CBC Manitoba. Thank you all very much for your work today and always. As we leave you, we have 1 degree in Winnipeg, -6 in Brandon, and -4 in Thompson with some light snow. And we've had a pretty good drive, so I don't have anything pressing that I've got to tell you about before we get off the air here about your commute. Take care, be well, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of the day. The Current's coming up next.